Hello, everyone. Welcome to our newest episode of Season in Review. On this show, we talk about the season in review. I have the two most influential players of Simvivor Palau with me. I have first place Banjo and second place and player of the season, T-Net or Trey. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hey everyone, this is Banjo. Excited to be here, and hopefully y'all enjoy this.
What's up, gamers? It's Trey. I'm excited for this as well.
And that's why you didn't get Dino's vote. Anyways, um, let's move on to the beginning. Right away, as known by most of the people applying, but Palau had a twist. 20 people were cast, but only 18 people were to be put in the tribes. Our workaround around that was we had a challenge in the beginning that determined two captains. One of the captains is actually in this call. Trey, how'd that challenge go for you?
Oh boy. Okay, so I sort of went into the challenge. I actually really liked that it was a blind challenge because I tend to psych myself out a bit on challenges. So I get into it and I'm immediately thinking like, okay, I've hosted similar things before. Where am I going to hide this? So the first place I look is the first message of marooning. And I see it and I'm like, there's like a little URL here. So I start going through the challenge and I'm getting all like the more like complicated ones, like channel headers, had to search for the coins. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I cannot get this last one. So I take the clue for this one as well. And it says something about like a dinosaur. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, where is this? I'm searching like Dino. I found like three people on the server with Dino in their name. I could not find anything. Then after like 20 minutes of just being stuck on that part, I found the PX first on the Dino like bot name, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to be kidding me." So when I finished the challenge, I didn't think I had any chance of winning it. So becoming a captain was pretty surprising.
Okay. You actually ended up killing that challenge at the time of around half an hour compared to Banjo. Do you remember what you got on that?
Actually, yes, I got 1 hour, 58 minutes, and a little bit of pocket change.
So Banjo
Um,
didn't do as well as Trey. And honestly, a lot of the cast did struggle. Not everyone even finished. So the Trey's half an hour was super impressive, which meant that Trey would be a captain in the upcoming schoolyard pick. Uh, but while this was all happening, you guys were able to have one-on-ones with everybody, all 19 people. What were you like? Were you guys? Would you have a strategy going into this? Was there anyone you knew? Was there people you were vibing with super well? Like, walk us through it, both of you, if you can.
uh, all right, so I just remember that first couple of days being absolutely overwhelming. Like I had researched Palau, so I knew that we were going in and I was gonna have all these DMs, but I don't think I fully processed how hellish it was going to be to just I remember mentioning in my confessional, it was basically like playing whack-a-mole where I would have all of my DMs collapse. I would just wait for one of them to go white and I'll go click on it, respond, and then three more had gone white on red. So I just kept jumping around and that was just me like all the first few days. When I this season, I only knew one person before the game started who was Sam's. We had played a speed together, we played an org together, and we co-hosted that org. So that was someone that I did know, and I didn't really. I was hoping that he wouldn't just like instantly think that we were going to be a tight duo or something just because of our pregame relationship, because I don't really play that way. And then everyone else, I just literally had no idea who any of these people were. So I just started trying to forge some early connections, just talk to everyone, be nice, be friendly. One thing that I didn't do that I do kind of regret was that for the entire marooning phase, I avoided talking about game. I was very scared to talk about game with people. I was worried that if I started talking game, started talking strategy, people were going to start seeing me as some like hardcore player, someone who like overthinks, and I didn't want to be perceived that way. So I was being friendly and I would social game, but I didn't want to talk actual strategy with anyone. And I do think that this limited my bonds early on. I can't really. I'm trying to think who I clicked with very well early on. I guess since Trey's in this call, Trey was someone that I was able to talk to a lot more than some of the other castaways, but Trey was also someone that I immediately felt might be sort of a threat down the road. They seemed like someone who kind of like knew what they were doing and someone that other people would like, and that concerned me a little bit. I had that same feeling with Vitor and with Atlan, if I remember correctly. And then some people that I just liked, just as like people, were like Didi, Becca, Senna, and one more of them. Oh yeah, and Fast. So those are some people that I just wanted to just kind of work with over the course of the game, based on those early conversations.
Yeah, so I guess I was almost a little bit on the other side of the coin in that for when I look for trust in people, I look for people who are immediately willing to show one of two things, and that's either A, weakness, or B, willing to talk game. So when it came down to it, I ended up finding myself clicking more with some of the bigger threats who were willing to talk a little bit more about their philosophies and strategies on the game. And that ended up being people like Atlan or Vitor, and we got along pretty well. So I think going in past the first 2 days of marooning, I knew that I wanted to be on a tribe with either Atlan or Vitor. So I ran that down, and I would always set aside like 2 hours a day where I'd literally just sit at the computer and wait for the notifications to come up, like Banjo was saying, and I would just talk to people. And I ended up getting to know pretty much everyone pretty well. I mean, there were a few conversations that I didn't have as much sort of like vigor with, or we didn't really like click as well. I mean, it's some of the people weren't as active, some of the people just sent emojis, some of the people were literally just AFK. So it's not easy to keep up all 20. So it boiled down to something like 8 actual conversations you're running at once, which is still a lot considering that's like a full tribe's worth. And yeah, I guess my main strategy was just to find the people who were willing to either show me that they were in a position where they didn't feel like they were doing well and might be looking for people to work with, or people who were willing to talk to me a bit more in depth about the game and thus work with me.
So it sounds like you two are both pretty social, and you each had one person you going in. But what I'm looking at is the voting chart right now, and so Trey, you were a captain. You picked Taco first, if I'm correct.
Yes, that is correct.
What informed you to pick Taco first? Like what was behind
Yeah.
that decision?
So another reason that I really liked Vitor from the start was Vitor was talking the most game with me. So once I became captain, we got on a voice call actually, and we started going down how we could construct a tribe. I wasn't sure if this was even possible. I'd theorized it in my confessional before we even got to this point, but I proposed it to Vitor, and he's like, "Yeah, it seems like a good idea. Let's talk about this." So, oh boy.
Nice. I love the dog. I love the dog
Yes.
appearance.
Sorry about that. I didn't
It's
even
happened
realize
in
she
most.
was in
It's
the
happened in
stream.
most of these. Don't worry.
Okay. So back to the thing. So Vitor and I started VCing, and I'm thinking like, okay, who do I know that is wanting to work with Vitor? Because there obviously was that second group that most people wanted to work with. I think it was group two of the like picking list. So after conversations with Vitor prior, I realized that Vitor and Sophie seemed to like each other a lot, and I actually had known Sophie from before the game. So I figured that that would be a pretty like easy connection to slide in, even though I didn't really want to work with Sophie just because of pre-gaming. It ended up becoming a fairly convenient way to sort of fill out the links, but we needed people to fill in those two intermediate slots. And Taco had approached Vitor earlier at some point. I don't know the exact timing, but they had made an agreement to pick each other in any scenario, and Vitor wasn't sure if it was legitimate. So we decided we needed to like investigate Taco to see if he was actually really just like full on board with Vitor that early. So I got in and I start talking to Taco, and Taco seemed fully down with it. So that's how we ended up determining that I should pick Taco first, and then Taco was going to pick Vitor. And then we had a little bit of debate between who should go in the fourth position of trying to like craft an early majority. And we were initially on Nature, but we switched back to Becca after we realized that Nature wanted to pick Banjo, but Banjo was going to be picked early, so we couldn't pick Nature because we didn't know where his pick was actually going to end up. And yeah, that's sort of how the whole Taco thing came about.
Okay, interesting. Banjo, do you remember who you picked?
Yes, actually, I picked Senna. I remember I was basically on the other half of the planning from Trey's half. A lot of my communication came from Atlin, basically about a couple of hours into after captains were revealed, and Trey and Atlin were the two captains. And Atlin sends me in his DM like, "All right, this is the plan. I'm gonna pick Pearl. Pearl's gonna pick Nature, and Nature's gonna pick you." And I remember at that time he told me that Pearl that I was wondering like why can't you swap me and Pearl? Like you pick me, I pick Nature, Nature picks Pearl. Because I didn't have a problem with any of those three people at the time. I was just kind of pushing him a little bit, seeing what was up, and he said something about how Pearl had submitted a list and didn't want to remake it, which sounded like BS to me. But I ended up going and confirming with Nature, and Nature seemed pretty down to pick me. So I was like, okay, this plan should work anyway. So that was how I ended up being picked overall, and that is how those picks went down. I did notice that Nature was approached by both Atlin and Trey at some point because he did tell me that both of them approached him as part of their initial plans, and that was something that caught my eye really early on. That maybe Nature, if he's someone that's being courted by both sides for those early plans, that means that he's very well liked and that he's good at getting people to trust him early. So that was something I needed to watch for. And then they never actually asked me to pick anyone, so they didn't really care. So once it got down to me, I just wanted to pick someone who I vibed with most. So I looked at the other group, and the person that I saw over there that I saw Senna over there, and Senna's who I ended up picking because Senna was a person that wasn't super talkative early on. They weren't inactive, but they were like a lot more quiet than some of the more heavy hitters on the cast, like Trey or Nature or Vitor or anyone like that.
Right.
But but when I had talked to Senna, I don't know, I just like talking to him honestly. Like we talked about like movies. He was like a film major. I felt pretty comfortable with him, so I felt like he was someone that might not be too threatening to me, but someone that would work with me. So I figured that'd be something that down the line in the tribe that'd be something I would be looking for, and so that's why I ended up picking him.
Interesting. Okay. Is there anything else you guys want to say before I move on to the first episode?
No, I think that's pretty good. I think that really encompassed the full half because after that, it basically became out of our hands.
Right.
Um,
Uh, yeah.
I'll just say Jarrett was robbed. I
Jarrett
don't.
was robbed.
He should
So
not have gone. He should not have been schoolyarded out. Like
no, I love
no.
Jarrett. He had two video
Two videos.
confessionals
When I
before.
saw that
Yeah.
afterwards, my heart just sunk. I was like, that's more than I made in a full season.
Yeah, and they were
Jarrett
like
highway
super
robbed.
well made. Like
They were good. He was highway robbed.
Ah,
So that left us with Kyle in 20th and Jarrett in 19th, which meant our tribes would be the Oolong tribe of Max, Bird, Fast, Becca, Taco, Vitor, Sophie, Didi, and Trey, with the Karor tribe of Meme, Senna, Sam's, Awa, Pearl, Atlin, Dino, Nature, and Banjo. As you'll see shortly, one of these tribes was much better than the other at challenges, with one of the tribes competing for the worst Simvivor tribe in history, challenge-wise. So first episode happens. Oolong loses, which is one of two times we'll see this happen. Oolong
we
loses
lost 3 times
wait, three
actually.
times.
three times. You're right, because
The one
the
time was
joint.
inconsequential. Yeah.
Yeah, so the other time didn't matter, but you know what I mean. First vote was for Max, 8-1. What happened here, Trey? Was this pretty easy? Like, what was happening here?
So this was sort of like the point where like the concrete was starting to set because there was actually more gaming at this tribal than you'd probably expect because coming off that captain's twist where we had so many people who were already gaming that early, there were a lot of people looking to make sure that what they had set up during that pre-phase of the game had really like solidified, and I was definitely one of those people. So the name was becoming less consequential and it was more like, okay, who are we even picking from name wise? For example, I wanted to set up a 5-person alliance with the first 5 people who were picked for Oolong because we all sort of worked together and getting picked together.
Okay.
but pretty quickly there was already friction of I believe it was Becca who said that they saw Vitor as threatening, and I knew that I saw Vitor as a threat, but I knew that Vitor also knew that people saw me as a threat, so we wanted to sort of stick together. So that became an issue, and it really came down to how are we going to solidify this majority going forward. So certain variables like Bird, we knew that Bird was closer to Sophie, and we knew that Sophie was with us. So we were sort of just looking for that sort of like central group we could put together, and we ultimately created the Alphabet Mafia between myself, Sophie, Vitor, and Taco. And we were going to work with that to try and make that the majority on the tribe. So we had this set up, and it really just came down to at that point somebody not in that group and somebody that we all thought we couldn't trust. And that ended up being Max because he was the least talkative in DMs and didn't really connect with anyone in the tribe. The only person he did connect with were myself and Bird, but at the time of Tribal, he had been completely gone. So I was fine with somewhat sort of dropping off Max in order to progress the strength of the alliance. And when he came online, something like 3 hours before Tribal ended, just he frantically tried to make an alliance to save himself. It made it a vote that sort of tugged at your heartstrings a bit more just because of how he actually came back at the very end to fight. But it was far too late because all the concrete had already set by that point. So he went out 8-1, but it felt a little weird, at least on my perspective.
Okay, that's very fair. What was happening on Karora in this first episode? Were alliances being formed, Banjo? Like, what was the feeling that you guys won a challenge? Was this feeling of winning gonna last?
Well, early on Karor, what I definitely remember that this was like really early because this was before. I think it was actually before the challenge even ended. It was like one of the first 1 or 2 days of the tribe even existing. There was already an alliance chat made of basically the first the four people that were involved in Atlan's plan. So Atlan, Pearl, Nature, and myself. I don't actually remember what the name of that was. Wow, I don't know. So, and in my confessional, I did immediately notice that I started taking to calling this like the Europeans and me, and I immediately noticed that that right there created some kind of separation. That I always had a feeling that those three were like the tighter subgroup, and I was sort of the fourth one looking in. In that if it ever got down to that few people, I think I would be the expendable person in that alliance. But that was super long term. A lot ended up happening after that, but that was sort of my early on thoughts. Besides that, I remember a lot of people were a little bit weirded out about Meme being picked because Meme was pretty like quiet for the very early portions of the marooning phase and basically only became active to most of us about 2 hours before the pick happened. So him being picked was a surprise to a lot of us, I think, or at least some of us. And but he became a lot more active after that, so we were sort of bonding a little bit. Winning that first challenge was all the credit for that has to go to like Atlan and Nature because apparently they live in like God-given dorm rooms or whatever that are the size of my thumb, and everything was within arm's reach for these guys. Like,
River.
I mean, yeah, Nature's like, oh yeah,
I'll never
I live
forget
on
that.
top of a river, and Nature's like, oh yeah, I just have a pizza cutter within arm's reach of me for no reason. And meanwhile, the rest of us were just kind of looking like, what? So those two carried that challenge, and we did end up winning it. I don't remember any real negative impact of that challenge. We're all just pretty happy that we won. We were hoping that maybe we would follow the show and sort of decimate Oolong, which that feeling lived well. Um,
Nice.
um, Yeah, basically, I didn't really have any issues with anyone off that challenge, even though Dino didn't really help at all. But I didn't think that was a problem early on. Then the only things I really took from that were that Atlan and Nature really came and clutched that challenge. So if they had, I was thinking that if they continue that challenge performance, that might be something to take note of. otherwise, it wasn't really that consequential. And then the Max boot didn't really surprise most of us because Max was one of the most inactive people during the merge. So when we saw he was gone, we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And that was basically our reaction to that, I think.
Okay. And as Banjo alluded to, Karor would be on their long march towards self-destruction in every future challenge. Episode 2 starts. As the trend starts to be from this point onwards, Karor gets smashed, and Oolong wins. And this is a really interesting vote because it is completely unanimous. Meme goes home 9-0. What happened, Banjo?
So that was a flag making challenge, and I'll be honest, I do understand why we lost it because I do think we had a good flag. I just think
You
that
both had good flags.
Oolong had a really good flag. Like y'all's flag was
Oolong's flag
wow.
was sick.
It
I
was
was
amazing.
100% DD. I think the Sophie and Becca were helping out with some of like the what people were gonna do in the picture, and I sort of had the idea of like make sure all the names are next to the people and whatnot, but like that was 99.99. Like we're talking hand sanitizer percent DD. And yeah, whenever we saw it, I think we were all just blown away, and I would have been surprised if we lost that challenge by any stretch of imagination. So I just want to give credit where credit's due.
It was a
Oh
very incredible flag from DD. But
yeah,
both flags were super good. Unfortunately, it ended with Karor losing. And they had to go to tribal council, where Meme was
yeah,
voted out 9-0. Meme voted for himself. Banjo, can you shed some light on any of this?
yeah. The only reason I even let in with the flag making was because it does kind of set up a little bit of the meme vote. So
Okay.
first off, I do want to say something because I don't. After the season, I haven't seen a lot of people really mention this. Meme's name was thrown out before the challenge was even over. Even though we thought, because like when we were in our sort of in the European and myself alliance chat, the Atlan, Pearl Nature, and myself, we did have during the challenge we had a little bit of a discussion about if we lose, who we should vote off, and I didn't really throw anyone out. I don't remember who was it, but someone in that challenge just like, I mean, meme is like not really helping that much in the challenges, and they're nice, but they're like one of the lesser active people, and we're all just like, I mean, yeah, that seems fine with us. So meme's name was sort of floating in the void before before we even knew we were going to tribal. And then after we lost the challenge, I was sitting in a VC with Meme because we were in a trial VC, and it was like me and Meme. Sam's was in it. Dino was in it at that time, and Nature was in that VC. And me, then they were all sort of complaining a lot about the challenge. I remember Meme kept repeating that he felt like the hosts rigged it, which was like, I mean, personally, it just kind of bothered me a little bit. That isn't the kind of thing that I think is particularly funny, at least at the time. So that I know that soured me personally on him. I wasn't going to vote him just for that, but like that was for me not really a point in his favor. And then um I remember I think it was around that time I had to leave. I had like a family emergency or a false family emergency. But basically I had the long story short is that I had to leave my computer, but I never left the VC, and I think I was even unmuted, so they might have thought I was there when I wasn't. And at this point, Dino had left, so it was like Meme, Sam's, Nature, and then I was there, but I wasn't there. So while I was gone, some discussion happened. I come back, and I'm in an alliance chat with all those people and Dino. So I'm like, I just got added to a majority chat by existing, I guess. And I was like, that's pretty bangers. But so that chat meme throughout Awa's name for being sort of the one of the least talkative. And I had mixed feelings on that because Awa was one of the lesser talkative people. That's true. Like she didn't talk as much as others at the time, but for both, or not for the first time, but for the flag making challenge, she had really helped a lot. She put a lot of work into it. She did a lot of the art. She put a lot of effort into it. She helped encourage other people to provide input, and that was something that I really liked. And also, honestly, just when I talked to Awa, I just liked her. Like, Awa's a really sweet person. She's really kind. She's pretty funny. So like, she was someone that I just didn't really want to go that much. So right now, we at this point in time, we had like meme throwing out Awa's name there. The Europeans were starting to sort of solidify themselves against meme. Since Nature was also in both chats, I talked to him a little bit, and he was like, "I'm probably leaning meme," and I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense. Me too." I remember I believe Atlin was the one that told Awa that meme threw her name out, which got Awa on our side as well. So at this point, we had 5 votes on meme, and then at some point during this, someone also got Dino to go for meme. So I I just remember that by that night, we had 6 votes pretty solidly on meme. We didn't really know where Senna and Sam's were, but at that point, that was pretty much majority. So I'm like, okay, this would be a pretty easy vote. And then the next day rolls around, and that's when shit hit the fan because someone had told Meme that they were getting voted, and Meme started scrambling like there was no tomorrow. He basically started running to just about every person on the tribe, pitching them just about anything that he could do to get them to keep him. I remember people kept telling me, Meme said this about you. Meme said this about this person. Meme is saying that this person made an alliance chat. Meme is talking about being good at challenges. Meme is saying that Meme threw out your name. Meme threw out Senna's name. Meme threw out Atlan's name. We threw out like half the names on the tribe in those few hours. It was pretty crazy, and it was eventually he did claim that some of that was exaggerated. I know he claimed to actually see that as well. That some of that he claims that he didn't really make a lot of majority alliance chats apparently, which Atlan did claim that he did. But I did personally see a lot of his scrambling, and that was something that kind of solidified me against him because I just thought if he really does scramble this much and he actually has the power to keep himself alive off of that, that's too that's actually pretty scary. That's the kind of power that I don't really want lasting in the game too long. And and I think it was really that sort of last minute scrambling that sort of solidified most people against him at that point. And then eventually he kind of held it up all the way to the deadline. Everyone's vote was on him. And he just kind of gave up and he knew that he wasn't going to get anywhere. And he voted himself, which is how the 9-0 happened. I do remember that he did play at the time. He placed a lot of the blame for this on Atlan because he said Atlan was the one that was claiming that he was doing most of the things that he didn't do. Like Atlan was the one that was saying that he was making a lot of majority alliance chats, which he claimed that he wasn't doing. So he told me right before he went, don't let Atlan get too far because he's a snake. And he was talking about knowing him pregame and another org and all that. And I did actually keep that in mind because I'd already from marooning, I felt like Atlan was someone who knew what they were doing. And I thought even if Meme was just scrambling trying to get my vote, I do feel like this is something to note that maybe this is just further evidence to that theory that Atlan could be a bigger threat down the road.
And I think what you're alluding to is actually perfect because it sees the next few votes are influenced by the group that you were talking about of Euros plus Banjo. Episode 3 rolls around. Again, Trey and Oolong steamroll the entirety of Karor. It was bad. It was brutal, as per usual. And Senna goes here in a 6-2 vote with Senna and Awa voting for Pearl. What happens here? It's not unanimous this time.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So for this vote, the Europeans ended up settling on Senna, which was like I didn't want Senna to go. I like Senna. Senna was the person I picked. Senna was someone that I felt like I could work with. And I didn't really want him to go, but I also didn't want to sort of go nuts defending him because he wasn't someone that I was ready to just stick my neck out and, go crazy trying to keep alive. So that wasn't something I felt was very helpful. Also, at that point, Senna, again, hadn't really helped a whole lot in any of the challenges so far. He was one of the lesser talkative people to me. So even after I picked him, I didn't feel as strong a connection to him as I had early on, or I felt like I had been able to foster better connections with others. So I wasn't feeling too bad about that. Awa was. I think there's something I should probably establish about Awa really quickly that I didn't establish last vote. Awa was someone that in the game, and this was something that almost freaked me out a little bit. She would be almost brutally honest with just about anyone, and I think that's part of just her personality. Which is, I mean, I love Awa, but like, I mean, this is a good thing that she's like, she doesn't like, she didn't like to lie much. She didn't really like to deceive people. That wasn't really her thing. So generally, if you ask, what I discovered talking to people was that generally, if you ask Awa who she was voting for, she'd just tell you who she was voting for.
Right.
So yeah, so during that vote, she said that she was going to vote for Pearl. I actually, this is so funny. I can't remember why. I think it was activity based. I think it was just because they didn't really talk that much, but it also might have been because of challenge performance. I'm actually not sure, but yeah, she was pretty settled on Pearl. And believe it or not, you actually, when you told me that I was the one to vote for Pearl, that's the one I realized right now that Ala didn't vote for Senna, because we did tell her that most people were going for Senna. I actually thought she changed her vote, so I just learned right now she didn't do that. The person who I thought voted Pearl was actually Sam's, because Sam's was really close with Senna, and right after the meme boot, Sam's made an alliance with like me, Senna, and Nature, and I think maybe Dino, because his idea was that then we have majority, we could start going for the Europeans. But the problem was, and Sam's never really knew this because I didn't really want to tell him and leak that, but the European alliance was like the Europeans and myself, and at this point, Dino was part of that too, because they had pulled in Dino as a fifth number during the meme vote to like confirm that they would always have majority. So at
Right.
that point, Dino was like an unofficial fifth member of this alliance. So I know Trey mentioned this later on. This is unrelated, but Trey mentioned that he likes to do a thing called shell alliances, which is like you'll have an alliance of five, and you have like a core four within that five, and you have like a core three within that core four, sort of like shells, alliances within alliances. And
Like an
within
onion.
and for that, it was like the major alliance was Atlan, Pearl, Nature, myself, and Dino. I felt like, and maybe even arguably Awa, because Awa was really close to Atlan and to me. And then the sub alliance would be Atlan, Pearl, Nature, myself. And then at that time, my theory was that the sub alliance was Atlan, Pearl, Nature. So anyway, the point was that nobody was really trying to go nuts for Senna. We told Senna the vote was Pearl just because, you know, that's what they were going for originally, and we never really dissuaded them of that. Uh, Senna ends up voting Pearl. Awa ends up voting Pearl because Awa never switched her vote. I guess Sam's must have gotten the message that we're going for Senna. I don't remember if I was the one that told him that or not. And then, so that's how Senna ends up going home 6-2. I felt pretty bad about it because I did want to work with Senna, but I did feel like I wasn't in too dangerous a position yet. And also, I was starting to take, at this point, I'm setting up for later right now. I was starting to notice that I was getting a little bit uncomfortable with how much power I felt Atlan had over the tribe, because Atlan felt like the leader of the Europeans plus me, the leader of all those shell alliances. So directly or indirectly, and he seemed like the closest to Awa at the time. So I was getting worried that he might just own the tribe soon and then just boot me, and that wasn't something that I particularly wanted to happen. So I was becoming more and more aware of this.
Okay. And you set that up well for episode 5. Episode 5 was Four Corners. This one was actually close until Karor decided to, all go on one square, which in hindsight wasn't the best option, but I mean, it could have worked out. Trey went ham on the math for his tribe in this, and unsurprisingly, Karor ends up losing again. Now, at this point, they've lost, that's 3 straight challenges, and Sam's goes home 5-2 with Awa again. And Sam's voting Pearl. Was this also pretty straightforward? You guys had the majority. Sam's wasn't in the majority. Easy vote.
Wait, I thought Awa voted Sam's is tribal. Wow. I don't think I read the voting charts right. First off, I do want to. This is going to be unrelated to the tribal, so I apologize. I want to talk about the challenge real quick and just. I need to apologize to Trey because Trey worked really, really hard on this challenge. From what I read after the season, like he really just sweat. He went all sweaty and he like did all this probability math, calculating the best odds. And meanwhile, on our tribe, Awa and I were just like, you know what we should do? We should just all take the stuff, all take the steal the power option, steal all of their powers, and make the entire challenge RNG. And that's exactly what happened.
So I feel I should come out of my cage and speak a bit on this because I did have sort of a focus on this challenge. I have sort of a thing. I've played a few RGs now, and whenever the challenge has a graph of any sort or grid lines or anything, I usually tend to lose my mind over it. So I saw this one and I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. This is my wheelhouse." So I start trying to I'm figuring out plays, I'm figuring out counter plays, I'm figuring out like optimal team compositions. I'm trying to figure out like which one of these things is going to run the longest. I had it set up the way that the challenge actually ran, assuming perfect probability, was it was almost like there was a set cycle no matter what you did, but it was a matter of offsetting that cycle. And then whenever you put the two cycles against each other, one would last longer than the other, almost like a clock that like it was just a clock that was just like going around a circle, and every time it hit a certain red line, it would just tick down by one until you died. So I was trying to figure out like how I could get these like clocks per se to align, and I was like, as long as we do this strategy, we have somewhere between like a 50% and 75% chance of winning. The only way that you can effectively fully counterplay it is if you just take all of the leafy power and just steal everything. And I mean, at that point, it's still 50-50. And then we go into the challenge, and that's exactly what happened essentially, except for the fact that somebody brought the future sight, which was a good play, and our team had like four future sights. So when everything canceled out, it came down to effectively 6-0 and one future sight on each tribe. Each one used the future sight for the exact same net gain of time on the clock. So it just became exactly the same. And it just came down to a pure flip of the coin the entire game. I remember I discussed the whole thing in my confessional, but after Karor got a single person up on us, it did not change until like the final three people remaining. It would just always be perfectly like nobody goes. Two people on each tribe goes. One person on each tribe goes. Just the whole way down the gamut until the very end. It was very weird to see, but I'm glad at least we won in the end.
Yeah, so we did end up basically making that challenge RNG, and there is something that I should mention that created a little bit of bad will for me and Atlan because for that challenge, a lot of the tribe was in a VC discussing it. I think actually maybe all of the tribe was in the VC. I don't know. So we were sort of discussing, we were talking about our moves live during that challenge, and we knew we were making this RNG. So I was telling everyone to sort of spread themselves out. I was coordinating everything to make sure that if a square were to get hit, we would have the minimal life loss possible. Which is like as Trey said, that was probably what contributed to sort of every time we lost some, they would lose some, and vice versa, sort of keeping everything balanced out, which it was keeping us in the lead. And then I blame Atlan for this. I bet Atlan blames me for this. Most people blame both of us for this.
Yeah, it was
Atlan
both of your
basically
faults. Sorry, keep going.
Atlan basically had the idea of, hey, let's take the two people that have two lives left, put them both in the same square, and that way, if that square gets hit, we both lose a life, and that's bad. But there's a 75% chance that doesn't happen, and then we're in an even better position. And I admittedly, I did quick math in my head. I was like, okay, odds are we don't get hit, and it benefits us. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. And everyone else was like, fine. So I guess fine. We're both a little bit complicit for it, but it was his idea. So, so we did that, and we both got hit. And then that's what kind of put us at a disadvantage. And then we couldn't really make up the deficit. At the end of it, it was me and Sophie left. Sophie had an extra life on me. I got a bad hit, and it was over. So that's how we lost. So there might have been a little bad will for both of us heading into that. And then we go into the Sam's vote, and this was where I did something that I definitely regret, or I think I played too hard in this tribal, honestly, and it did not do many favors for my game. People saw. I found this out after the season. I didn't know that. Actually, no, I didn't know this then because nature told me. People saw Sam's and myself as a duo. Now, at the time, I hadn't told people about our pregame relationship because A, I didn't want people to think we were pre-gaming, and B, I just didn't want to advertise that because we weren't pre-gaming. Like, I honestly was not trying to pre-game with Sam's. I was not trying to metagame him out. I didn't want him to go, but I also wasn't going to ally with him just because we knew each other beforehand. But apparently Sam's did tell people that we knew each other beforehand, so the fact that I was hiding that probably looked even more suspicious. And there was also this other thing where I would always join a VC when someone was in a VC. That's something that I did the whole season. That if someone was in a VC, I wanted to be in it. And I bet Trey's going to mention this later on too during the joint tribal, but I'm going to set that up now. Where if there was a VC, I wanted to be in it because I didn't want people talking and I couldn't hear it if it was possible for me to hear it. So, and Sam's would be one of those people that would really like to join VCs. And I don't think Sam's realized that you can make a private VC or something like that. So he would always be in a tribe VC. So there were a lot of situations where it was just Sam and me alone in a VC, and everyone can see that we're alone in a VC. Which, yeah, that's pretty suspicious. So people saw us as a duo, and then the European alliance basically they targeted Sam's, which it did make to me. I was like, yeah, that makes sense because all the two people that are not in some form of this alliance are Awa and Sam's, and Atlan is closely connected with Awa. And at this point, I had been closely connecting myself with Awa as well because I really wanted Awa to trust me. Just because I had a feeling that maybe down the road, if I could get Awa to merge, she'd be someone that would work with me really, really well. So I was always trying to sort of forge that trust, which doesn't end up paying off. Spoiler alert. But anyway, so I wanted to keep going and voting out to people who I felt weren't as active. So I actually wanted to go for Pearl this tribal because Pearl, other people left. I felt like Pearl was sort of the least active in talking to me. They really hadn't helped at all for like any of the challenges except for like I guess flag making. And even then, I felt like all had helped a little bit more than they had. Not to discredit Pearl. Pearl did work for that challenge, but and also I just felt like they were one of the people I talked to the least. So that's where I wanted to go. I figured Sams would definitely vote Pearl. I figured getting all on a Pearl wouldn't be a problem, and then I get myself and Nature, and then that's 4, and then maybe we can even get Dino, which would be 5. I didn't think Atlan would vote Pearl because I thought that Atlan and Pearl were a bit of a duo, which it turns out I was right, but I didn't know that. Then bad things happened because the Nature was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the Europeans and I'm going for Sam's, and Dino was like, yeah, I'm going for Sam's. Awa did want to go for Pearl because Awa was almost constantly gunning for Pearl, and I think this is where that rivalry started, and they did get a best rivalry nomination at awards because they did just sort of start scrapping at each other. This might have even been there was a tribal where they had like a fight in public in tribal chat, which I think was pretty crazy.
Nice.
Yeah, so anyway, all I always had that sort of thing where I want to go for Pearl, and everyone else was basically on Sam's. I really didn't want Sam's to go, and this is where I made a pretty big mistake because even though I wasn't like super close to ally with Sam's, I definitely made it seem like I was because I
Right.
fought really, really hard to keep Sam's and boot Pearl. Like way harder than I should have fought for a God given F15 or whatever it was. I was in Nature's DMs, I was in Dino's DMs, I was begging them, I was outlining to them, and this is when I started throwing out. This is when we began what I'm gonna call Atlan Mania, which is like my obsession with getting Atlan booted or getting Pearl booted to weaken Atlan because I kept saying to both Nature and Dino, Atlan is a big threat, Atlan is a big threat, Atlan is a big threat. If it gets down to it, Atlan will not be scared to boot us, any of us. He'll boot all of us. He'll go to merge. He'll flip. You can't trust Atlan. We need to boot Atlan. or we need to boot Pearl so that Alan has nobody, and then we can boot Atlan. And this is when I started doing that because I didn't want Sam's to go. So I kept hammering that into both Nature and Dino, and neither of them ended up biting on that. They're both like, no, we're gonna vote Sam's. And Sam's also tried to make a pitch for himself. I hurt really bad. Apparently, he was literally crying, which I feel really, really bad about because I know Sam's had been trying to get into Simvivor for a really long time, and I do wish he had played the game more. But at the end of the day, nobody was budging for him. I couldn't save him, and I definitely ended up worsening my own position by all but confirming that whether or not that duel was a thing, it made everyone think that duel was a thing. So Sam's ends up going out 5-2. Sam's votes for Pearl because that was his only shot. I'll vote for Pearl because I always voted for Pearl. And that's how that happened. And that was the end of that tribal.
Okay, and I think that pretty cleanly brings us into the double tribal. Now, to be fair, Karor did win the challenge. Well, Karor's individual won the challenge, right? So Karor, this episode was a double tribal. Both tribes got to go to tribal. How it worked, the tribe that won had tribal council first. In this case, Karor had tribal council first. At Karor's tribal council, they voted out Alwa 5-1. Afterwards, they got to sit in and listen to the deliberations of the Oolong tribe, and then Karor would then choose who to give individual immunity to on the Oolong tribe, and they did this through voting. So let's talk about the Alwa vote first, 5-1. I mean, seems pretty cut and dry after 2 votes of Alwa not voting with you guys, but was there more behind this?
First off, I would like to establish some stuff that may have happened during the challenge, and I'll encourage Trey to jump in on this as well as if he wants, because there was some game talk that happened during the challenge. Because the way that this challenge worked was that there were sort of representatives picked for each tribe to compete, and they were paired up, and each person was paired up with someone on the other tribe. And the key to this was that you could cross tribe communicate. You were free to talk about anything you wanted to with the person you were paired with on the other tribe in that channel. And I think that was something that I was really hoping to get paired with someone good. I was really hoping to get paired with, like, Trey. I would have loved to be paired with you, to be honest. Like, you or
Oh,
Vitor.
absolutely. I'll speak on that in a second, but yeah.
Yeah, I was really hoping, like, let me get paired with one of those big head honcho. Let me get some real game talk going. And then they're like, you're paired with Fast. And I'm like, there's no way Fast is in a good position because I knew Fast from the marooning. Nobody really liked her that much, and she nearly went out by Schoolyard. This is not going to be very helpful to me. So it did end up a little bit helpful to me because I go into there, I'm doing social gaming with Fast. Fast is like really chill. I do think that Fast is like a really cool person, honestly. Like, I just feel like they're really chill to talk to. So I basically sort of strengthened my bond with Fast to the point where I felt like I had confirmed that if she could somehow make merge, then we would be pretty closely allied. And then Fast was telling me that she was pretty scared that she was going to go that vote. And I was actually inclined to agree with her because based on what I had seen from marooning, I didn't think she would be particularly well liked. And she claimed that the one vote that Max had was for Fast on that Max vote, which indicated that she might be on the outs. I did feel like she would probably be on the outs. So I pretended to her that I was on the outs in my tribe, which it turns out I probably was on the outs, but I didn't know that. I didn't think I was on the outs at that time as much as, say, like Awa or Dino might have been. So we basically both made a deal where if whichever one of us wins, we're going to fight to try and make sure that the other one gets the immunity necklace. So I did already have that in my mind for that challenge. Nobody else told me any significant information that they got. And then I'm going to pass it off to Trey because I'm sure he has some stuff to say about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in a similar boat to Banjo, and I wanted to be paired up with someone who I felt might have more of an insight on the Karor tribe, which, in my opinion, was Nature, Banjo, and Atlan at the time. And I think those were probably 3 fairly good assumptions based off how they all did in the game. And when I got paired with Alwa, I forget what happened. I either got like a lot of reacts on this message or this message got started or something, but I was like, I really got Alwa because like I didn't think there was going to be anything of substance that came from that conversation, and I didn't really my first impression with Awa was that Awa was just sort of there to mess around, and like I didn't really have a problem with that, especially like when it just came to normal gameplay. But when it came to my one chance for cross tribe communication, it didn't feel especially good for it to be spent in a place like that. So I knew that I was gonna have to fight somewhat hard to get something out of her possibly, and I found that out pretty quickly because once we actually got into that chat, first of all, I figured out I liked Awa a lot more than from Marooning. We got along a lot better than I expected, and I was like, okay, I hope that she maybe sticks around a bit longer, but can she give me anything of substance on the game? Which didn't happen. I was a little disappointed. But what I did ask was what finally got somewhere was when it came to the immunity necklace, I was like, so do you think you're safe? Like, if you go, should I give you the immunity necklace? Because I think I could make that happen. And she's like, no, I think I'm safe. And I'm like, okay, that's good. And I was like, well, if either of us don't think we're safe, because we both kind of think we're safe here, let's make up a code of what we could say in either of our public tribals in order to get the necklace onto someone else. And what I'm thinking through my head is if it seems like Fast is going to get the necklace here, I can just say the code, and then Awa will be like, Trey and I made this code. Trey said the code. Trey's getting voted. We can put it on him. And I was like, this is going to work really well for me. And if Awa says the code, I can save Awa and potentially buy myself a free ally at Merge. So it was just like, I had taken what initially seemed pretty bad into possibly a free ally or securing a vote. And I was like, okay, this is pretty good. And then my hopes were just completely dashed when Awa was gone immediately. And I was like, oh boy. So yeah, that was my experience with the challenge. And when it came to Oolong discussing the challenge, they actually were pretty open with what some of the core members said. I mean, obviously, there was some fudging of numbers and fudging of how people approached the challenge, but when it came down to actually like tribe dynamics that were shared, they were shared pretty loosely between the Oolong members. And from there, I was actually able to like mentally put together a picture of what Karor was like that ended up proving better than almost anyone else on Oolong. So yeah, that was my experience with the challenge.
All right, and then from there, I'll lead into the tribal. So at that tribal, at this point, Pearl was basically done with Awa's. What's a nice way to say like it was? It's not to hit to Pearl. It was
Shenanigans.
yeah, shenanigans. I guess bullshit. I don't know. But like basically, Pearl was sick of Awa voting them every God given tribal. That's what I remember happening anyway. So Pearl was like, "Let's go for Awa." I really, really didn't want to vote Awa. So this is where Atlan Mania comes in again because I go to Nature and Dino because I know Nature and Dino are the swings here. And I'm just begging them, come on, we can get Awa into this for sure. And I'd even talked with Awa and I'd even managed to get Awa to say something along the lines of, okay, I might vote Atlan if need be. Because I told her that like your neck is on the line here. And she trusted Alan a lot, but I did think she trusted me a little bit more. So I figured if I can get Nature and Dino on to Alan, we can just make it all happen. So I was like really working hard on Nature, really working hard on Dino, vote Atlan, vote Atlan, vote Atlan. And eventually Nature did leak this plan to me that he and Dino had come up with a plan that we're gonna vote out Awa now, and then we'll vote out Atlan at F5 because at that point the three of us would have guaranteed numbers. It wouldn't be a problem. And I was like, so why don't we just vote out Atlan now? And then we can vote out Ala at 5. It doesn't matter. Everyone would vote out Ala at that point. Even Pearl would. Because Pearl wouldn't really have another choice but to listen to us. And they were like, no. It turned out some things postseason led to that, contributed that more than I expected. But at that point, I was really confused why they were refusing to vote Atlan off. It was actually really scaring me because I felt like they were all falling for Atlan's trap of conviction. They're going to let Allen make it a merge, and I desperately did not want Allen to make a merge because I did not trust Allen. I would not trust a merge Allen at all. But at the end of the day, neither of them were budging, neither of them were flipping, and we ended up voting off Awa 5-1. Everyone voted Awa. I assume Awa voted Pearl again for the 100th time. I don't know. Did you want me to talk about how we discussed giving the immunity necklace as well?
Yeah, so for some context before that, Oolong was actually having a movie night on their VC. Trey, do you remember what movie you guys were watching? I think it was either Sophie or Dee Dee sharing.
So yeah, that's actually kind of funny. So when it came to the movie night or whatever the heck we were doing, I remember Banjo saying something in his confessional or at reunion or something like I was trying to figure out what's going on and they're watching a freaking movie. And the funny thing is I said something almost verbatim to what he said in my confessional. Because like I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what is going on right now? Like we don't have any plan for this and people are turning on this movie. I can't tell you the name of the movie because I did not watch 10 seconds of it. I was just
I
in the VC.
It did
I
seem awkwardly silent where everyone was wanting to talk and no one wanted to say anything.
yeah,
I
there
I
was
can tell you the name of the movie. It was Your Name.
Well,
ironic.
you weren't in danger, so I'm sure you were enjoying it a lot, Banjo.
I think given different context, I would have maybe like enjoyed the movie or like watched it, but I was too stressed out to pay any attention to it. So that didn't go over well, and it was just it was effectively just 2 hours of purgatory. So yeah, I think that people on Oolong were trying to like push some narrative that we're in Kumbaya to Koror, when in actuality it's like if we don't get this soon, suddenly a PowerPoint presentation is going to win over this entire tribal, and that's exactly what
That
happened.
is what happened.
All right, so I'll go. So just quickly going over how the Media Necklace got to fast. So going once I knew we won, I was like, okay, I need to. Assuming I survived the trial, once I was out, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure Fast gets this necklace because I'm pretty sure they're all going to go for Fast. My problem was I need to convince them, as in the other four, Atlan, Dino, Nature, Pearl, that Fast was going to be the one they're all voting for. And for some, I'm sorry, this was stupid as fuck, but like Pearl was like, we should give the immunity to Vitor. I'm like, why the hell would you give it to Vitor? Vitor is almost clearly on, like, there's no way Vitor was on the bottom of that tribe. I knew Vitor was on the top of that tribe. And what Pearl kept saying was that Vitor is going to work with us at Merge. Vitor is the kind of person, had a great conversation with them in our dual channel. I think they'll work well with us on Merge. It was almost to the point of suspicion, Austin, where I was like, they're really, really convinced that Vitor will work with them on Merge. I did not put two and two together and realize that those two want to work together and not necessarily all of Koror. I just thought that Vitor was really, really smart and was tricking Pearl so that come Merge, Vitor was going to be able to play the middle better. So that just scared me of Vitor even more. But anyway, so I was like, fine. By this point there was like a VC for their tribal. I was like, okay, fine. Y'all, they're in the VC. Y'all send this VC. Fast is in this VC. You listen to what's happening. So I was in that VC. Dino was in it. Nature was in it. I think even Pearl was in it at one point. Only one that wasn't there was Atlan because he was drunk off his ass. But that's not the point. Um, oh yeah, Atlan was drunk as shit at this time. So anyway, we were listening to this and we could and Fast gives us this goddamn PowerPoint presentation on why she should get the immunity necklace. And just there was something about it. We could hear that the way people were addressing Fast, the way Fast talked, like the sound in people's voices. And that's what convinced it that even I could hear it. I was like, yeah, they're gonna boot Fast. They want to go for Fast. We could hear it. And so we're all like, okay, yeah, we're giving Fast the immunity necklace. So we all voted Fast. Atlan came in literally screaming, I'm drunk. Who are we voting for? And we're like, we're giving an immunity necklace. Who are we giving the immunity necklace for? To Fast. We're giving it to Fast? Yes, write Fast on the parchment. And that's how Atlan voted. And then the rest of us voted, and we gave the immunity to Fast. And then I'll say one last thing before I give it to Trey. I didn't want them to be able to say anything without someone on Koror knowing what was happening. And there were only two places they could talk. They could talk in the tribal chat, which anyone could see, or the VC. So I knew I had to be in that VC as long as people were in it. Because if someone was talking strategy, I wanted to be there. I wanted to hear it. And if they can't talk strategy because I'm there, all the better for me. Maybe shit will go down and they all go for a threat. And then someone like maybe even Trey gets voted out. I was actually kind of hoping Trey would get voted out somehow because I thought that'd be really funny. All right, take it away, Trey.
That's a great segue. I think that'd be hilarious too, but I was not going to let that happen. So what it ultimately came down to is we're headed into this sort of position. It reminds me of the circle, which is like it's a type of speed that I play where you're not allowed to talk to anyone unless it's in one public chat. And the thing about the circle first boot is it always comes down to who's the most AFK usually, or who it's done something so egregiously wrong. But the problem was we had all gotten the time to solidify beforehand, so there was nobody in this position. We sort of had all these alliances crafted and all of these bonds forged, and we didn't have that pariah that we could just be like, bye bye. So we're thinking to ourselves, or I'm assuming we were all thinking to ourselves, I was thinking to myself, what are we going to do here? Because we have the mafia, which we could not let anyone go from. And this was a critical point, too, because that was a group of four. We're at a point where there's 8 people in the tribe. We need to do everything in our power to make sure somebody not in that group goes home. Because if we do, we're probably making merge. So there was a lot at stake here. And again, we're watching a movie and I'm like freaking out. So the other groups that we knew of is we knew that Becca and Dee Dee were really close. I knew that Sophie was potentially working with Becca and Dee Dee. I couldn't tell, it wasn't especially clear who Sophie was with at the time because Sophie didn't have enough time at this point in the game to sort of leak all the information back to Vitor and I, which is sort of how we eventually figured out Sophie was more with us. Or at least I did. I know that now in retrospect that Vitor and Sophie were essentially a ride or die duo. So I'm sort of in this weird position where it's like, I don't think I can take out Becca. I don't think I can take out Dee Dee. I can't take out Sophie, Vitor, or Taco, and Fast is immune. So it really sort of fell onto Bird, in my opinion. And Bird was a weird scenario because I think every single person on Oolong, Fast included, thought they were with Bird to a degree. Bird was sort of playing a very like low key, friendly. He was AFK at weird times because he worked nights. And so you got to talk to Bird a little bit. And during that time, it seemed like he was able to talk to everyone and made people sort of feel like they were with Bird. I know in retrospect now that he was, for the most part, with Becca and Dee Dee. But like even at that point, I thought that Bird was with me to a degree. And I think that everyone else, I know that Sophie thought Bird was with her. I'm assuming that everyone else did because I know that Max thought he was with Bird. He was just sort of like very omnipresent in tribe thinking as like, oh yeah, Bird will vote with us. So when it came to putting a vote on Bird, it wasn't exactly the easiest thing to pull off, but he didn't really have a side either. So he became sort of that pariah of the circle, as I would like to call it. So it got to a point where I had the same mentality as Banjo. Like I was going to stay on that VC till 4 a.m. I did not care what it took because that was the entire game at that point. And the only way you could play the game is you had to wait for certain people to rotate out of VC. So I remember at one point we just had the Mafia in VC and then Banjo was sitting there. And I just wanted to unmute and just scream, vote for Bird. Like, let's just do it, get it over with, tell anyone you can think of. But I couldn't because Banjo was just sitting there. And this could have been one of the points that Banjo was gone. And I knew for a fact, like in my mind, I was like, there's no way he could be attentively listening for like 6 hours or something. I knew there were points where he was gone, but it was like, am I willing to take that risk? And at the time, no, I was not willing to take that risk. So I knew I had to get creative into somehow pushing a name through all of these just layers of. It felt like I was like trapped under like a layer of like blankets or something. Like you can't even speak. So it got to a point where the VC comprised of everyone on the tribe except for Fast, Bird, and Vitor. And it was a weird group because it was like Taco and I were on the Mafia side, and then we have Becca and Dee Dee, and then we have Sophie, and it's like, okay, this is sort of a majority here. Like, what can we do with this? And I knew that Vitor, without being talked to, would probably be leaning towards voting Bird as well, just knowing him. So I have them all in the VC, and I'm like, okay, if Vitor and Bird aren't in this VC and Vitor is like ubiquitously liked, I can maybe get this onto Bird by proposing that everyone in VC is somehow some form of new alliance, since this is like a newer tribe because we'd only been to one tribal. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is so sad. We're gonna have to vote out someone. Just stating the obvious and acting dumb. I mean, it's sort of my hallmark. But I'm trying to talk everyone up, and then I'm like, I guess we have to determine between Vitor or Bird because they're not in this VC. Like, oh no, how could we ever vote one of them out? And like I know that nobody's gonna throw Vitor's name. So I keep repeating that sort of mentality until I think it was Taco who cracked first. It was either Taco or Sophie, and one of them was like, "Yeah, I think I'd rather, I guess, vote Bird," like a very like timid sort of feeling, and that sort of rose up through that. We ended up getting it to someone got it to Fast. I did not get it to Fast. I don't understand how Fast voted Bird. I don't know if anyone knows how Fast voted Bird, but it was a crucial vote for the tribal. But it got back to Vitor. There was a point where I think it was just Taco, Sophie, myself, and Banjo on the VC, and we were just sort of that was the most open I ever talked in that small corner, and we were like, okay, we finally kind of know what we're doing a little bit here. So that's how the vote cycled, but we didn't really know where everyone's head would be at because before the tribal, when we had like that 24 hours to talk, I had talked to both Becca and Dee Dee, and while they were saying Fast's name, they were also saying Taco's name. And I think at this point in the game, Taco was like number two on my trust, maybe even number one. So I was like, yeah, that's not gonna fly. So I was trying to do everything like beforehand, like, okay, yeah, I agree. I don't really trust Taco at all, but I did. But I think Fast is sort of the one that nobody likes and we could get an easier vote on. And everyone agreed with that. So now with Fast removed from the equation, I knew that Becca and Dee Dee were immediately going to default to Taco. So I was hoping that we could somehow get those five votes together. And luckily that all came together. Whenever that 5 versus 3 came through on the screen, I knew because my vote was the fourth one revealed. Like once that third vote came through, I had like the biggest sigh of relief. I ran downstairs excited because that was a very exhausting tribal to go through. And it was just like 6 hours on VC. And all the game that it really came down to was just forcing a small, timid ultimatum and the perfect combination of people on a voice call. And it ended up working to a point that set me up pretty much for the entire remainder of pre-merge and even a little bit in the merge.
Uh, I'll add one last thing just to cap off this tribal. Um, so the VC ended up being closed about halfway through it, around like it was like literally like midnight my time. So I think that was like 1 a.m. for the EST people. And at this point, I do remember when it was just Sophie, Taco, Trey, and me. Trey ended up like dropping off, so it was just Sophie, Taco, and myself. And this is where something really weird happened that to this day I don't actually know why it happened. Because Sophie, right when Trey left, Sophie told Taco, Taco, listen, people are going to be throwing votes on you this tribal. And then and then she's like, oh wait, Banjo's here, and then they acknowledge my presence. And I still don't know. I don't know how she. I guess maybe like Tracy, maybe she knew because she was close with Becca and Dee Dee, so she already knew. They were thinking Taco. I feel like she knew I was there the whole time. I don't know if she leaked it to me intentionally. I don't know what the purpose of that might have been. I didn't know if she did it by accident, but I didn't know if she. I didn't really know what to make of it, but I did remember mentioning it in my confessional, and I just said, maybe Sophie is someone that I might be able to work with come merge based on this. So that was something in my head as well.
Yeah, that's actually something interesting to mention because I remember I said something like this entire tribal is just going to be one big endurance competition because of how long you can stay on the VC. And I remember when Jack decided to shut down the VC, I was like, oh, thank goodness. I can't wait to get off this VC. And he's like, all right, we're shutting it down. We're shutting it down. But I'm looking at the VC and nobody's leaving. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I was prepared to stay on for more hours. And eventually he's like, yeah, we're shutting it down. And I saw the icon change to like a locked symbol or something. I was like, okay, whatever. And I was just like, I think it's over. And I left. And then I proceeded to stare at it for like another 5 minutes where it was just Sophie, Taco, and Banjo. And I'm like, what the heck's going on there? Like, am I missing something? That actually did psych me out a little bit. But ultimately, I think by the time that that happened, the vote had already been determined. And then it was just 18 hours of agony.
Okay, I think that pretty thorough explanation leads us to the last few pre-merge votes. Yeah, in the next episode, episode 7, again, Oolong wins, unsurprisingly. Pearl goes home in a 3-2 vote, and it feels like this vote dictated the future of Karor, because next vote Atlan went home 3-1. So Banjo, what's happening here? This seems pretty impactful for the Karor tribe.
So first off, I want to say this week was probably the worst week that I've ever played an org with in my life. Nothing to do with the org, but in real life, the power in my entire state basically just completely went out because we got hit by snow. And I live in Texas, and Texas doesn't know what the fuck to do when it snows. So literally, we lost all. I didn't have power. I was trying to play an org during a power outage. It was one of the most stressful experiences of my life. I remember I literally at some point during these days I had literally walked like physically a mile or so, and it was raining all the way to the supermarket because they had generators, which meant they had Wi-Fi, just so I could go on Discord and make sure that I was in a half decent position in the org. I was literally I was losing my mind with stress about this. I was worried I was gonna get voted out for being inactive. I still am not entirely sure how I survived that unscathed. But so my point is that during these couple of tribals, the Pearl one and the Atlan one, my head was really just not in the game. Like I was not really thinking about the game that much. I was a lot more concerned with real life issues. But I will discuss the game a little bit. First off, you neglected to mention that we lost the 12th place challenge by 37 seconds of an average, which is just literally, I was kicking myself because I was like, if I had literally been 5 minutes faster on the puzzle, we would have won. And it would, because that entire challenge was basically like a 209-piece jigsaw, which was cruelty. So I was so pissed that we lost because I was like, we might have actually won that one. And this was a really scary vote because there's only 5 people. I knew, and at this point, I knew Atlan and Pearl were going to be gunning for me because we were down to 5 people left. They were all sort of that people from Atlan's major alliance. And I was 99% sure that Atlan had somehow discovered that I had been gunning for him for ages. And sure enough, at that tribal, those were the only 2 votes I ever got in the game. Both Atlan and Pearl voted for me. They were suspicious of me, which made sense. I thought they'd be suspicious of me, and I was suspicious of them. So the key was I need to make sure Nature and Dino were good to go. And I didn't really have a lot of ability to do that because I didn't have power and I didn't have a lot of time to talk. But luckily, the Pearl Voda specifically, that was the one day I had power. Not power in the game, literal electric power. So I was actually able to talk today. So I talked to Nature, I talked to Dino, I made sure of them like 1,000 times that they're on board. We made an alliance chat. It was called Brains, Bronze, and Bitches. Dino was Dino was the brain, Nature was the brawn, I was the bitch because that made sense. So I made sure like 1,000 times that we were good, and it turns out that they stuck to their plan, and that was a really crucial vote for me because I feel like if any one of them had flipped, I was done. Probably we're gonna get some, like, I don't know who would have been out after that. Either Nature or Dino, and then those other 3 make merge, and I think then the merge goes very differently because I think like Atlan and Pearl and merged, it would have been really different dynamics. So that was like a deciding vote for my gameplay, and I did the work. I made my pitches to Nature and Dino. I pointed out to them how big a threat Atlan was, how if you let Atlan get to merge, you're done, and they were good. In the end, we were actually originally going to vote at Atlan that tribal. We ended up switching to Pearl just because Dino had communicated less with Pearl, and honestly, at that point, I didn't really care because I'm like, they're basically, I saw them as a duo, so I'm like, it's interchangeable. You vote out one now, you can vote out the other later. And I did end up voting out Pearl just because in case we did win a few challenges somehow and Atlan made merge, I felt like Atlan would at least be easier to see what was happening with him than Pearl. Pearl would be a little bit more subtle, so I was worried I'd be less sure what was happening there. So we vote out Pearl that way, and then we lose another challenge. And at this point, I have no power, and I know I found out later, I freaked Trey the hell out with the Atlan Tribal because it took about, no, not Trey, I'm sorry, Vitor. We freaked them the hell out with the Atlan Tribal because we took about 2 hours to do it. The reason why the Atlan Tribal was so fast was because when we went to Tribal, I was in the parking lot of a supermarket, and I had a limited amount of time before they were going to throw me out for loitering. So I said, so I literally was like, I do not have time to stall around and get wishy-washy about the vote. I went to Nature and Dino. I said, it's time. We're voting Atlan out. Can't do anything else because I'm not trying to vote either of you out. Alan made his pitch to me. I ignored it. I told him I'll vote where he wanted. I did lie to him. I intended to tell him the truth later, but I was never able to because I didn't have power. So then I ended up voting about half an hour into the tribal and just going offline. And when I came back online, tribal had ended and Atlan was gone. So that tribal ended up really quick. Cause I think basically once I voted really, really fast, and Nature Darn like, okay, no point in waiting. So that tribal went by really quickly because of that. And those ended up being really defining tribals for me. I feel like 'cause without those tribals, I literally would not have been merged. I would have been in the 12th place gang. So it was that allowed me to go into merge, and that allowed me to go into merge with Nature and Dino. And those votes really, I feel like, cemented Nature and Dino's trust in me. So that once we hit merge, I didn't think they would flip on me. That there would be that should somehow things get wonky, they'll be a lot more likely to flip on each other than on me. And that's what I was hoping for. And I do feel like, in a sense, based on what happened in merge, they did still end up sort of closer to me, and especially Nature ended up really close to me and merged. A lot of that I feel like was because of those seeds that I planted during those couple of votes.
I think that's super insightful. And like you said, that Coror 3 would eventually hit the merge, which means one final pre merge challenge, which surprisingly, Coror doesn't lose, which means Oolong has to go to tribal. Trey sort of set it up earlier when Fast got immunity from Coror, but it seems like Fast was the easy boot, and it seemed like that with the unanimous vote. Trey, was that the case?
Um, yeah, absolutely. There was less talk about this vote than there was about the vote at first merge during this entire tribal. Um, Fast actually did not talk any game with me for the entirety of the tribal, which actually sent me into a spiral of thinking I was somehow getting blindsided. But apparently, I looked back just to check because this tribal was just so bizarre. It was like the two Oolong tribals that happened that weren't on VC were very just muted, like no game talk, like silence the press, we're getting this over with. And it was a feeling that I'd never felt before in any org, and it was very uncomfortable because everything was just like one word, okay, done. And that's how it was with Fast because nobody trusted Fast. Fast had gotten the immunity necklace. It made perfect sense for Fast to jump at merge, but with nobody talking about it, it just got weird. So I was a little bit worried about that. I looked back and Fast had talked to some people about a vote onto Taco, which was unsurprising because Taco seemed to just be, he was less active than the entire tribe, but he actually had made allies and played a better game than some of the people. So every vote that was faked almost for the entirety of like the rest of the game, it felt like was on to Taco. So Fast had tried to get something going on to Taco, but they didn't even talk to like half the tribe, so I don't understand how that was expected to work. Um, Fast wasn't present for tribal, and it was just a very quick, unanimous, just awkwardness, and it made the tone going into merge especially weird, which is what I sought to fix through the talk that happened about the first merge vote, because I want to say sometimes right towards like the first few hours of this tribal, Becca said that she wanted Dino out. And it was simply because of like a vendetta on him after Jarrett got booted from the first picks, because I guess Becca and Jarrett were a duo. But I went to Vitor and I'm like, hey, we can just use this. And then I was like, heck, if we Pagong, it's really going to be pretty good for my game because I've already got the shelled alliances set up. Like, if I can get to Final Four, I was pretty confident I could comp out, especially after the first competition of the game. I was feeling pretty strong in my competition abilities. And I was like, maybe we do just want a Pagong and I can start setting that up here. So I went into like superficial happy mode for this tribal, which isn't something I usually like to do, but I was really trying to preach tribe unity, get everyone hyped for merge, be like, yeah, we're gonna destroy Koror at merge. Yay, look at us. We're the best tribe that's ever played this game. It just, the contrast of that mentality against just the solemn, just like decrepitness of the fast vote, it was such an awkward vote. But essentially, this is the point in the game where the Dino vote actually started to solidify before most of the people at Merge had even talked to Dino. So yeah, that's what happened there. And Fast went home.
that leads us pretty perfectly in the merge. Karor, after their interesting pre-merge, was very much down. Would you guys like to talk about merge? Just first impressions, what your goals were, all that jazz.
Uh, I'll go first because I think mine is definitely a lot simpler than Trey's. Basically, me, Nature, and Dino. I think we all had the same thought going into merge. Part of my French, we were fucked. Um, we knew we were like, oh my god, we were going into merge 6-3 travel lines, and I felt so miserable because I think, and this will segue into a lot of it. My pre-merge game was markedly different than my merge game because a lot of my pre-merge game was me. I do feel like it was a lot of it was me kind of overplaying because I was obsessed with getting Atlan out and overplay, bunch of votes. Made myself a target. Somehow work control anything about my own destiny because everyone else was close selves and they were with me. So I basically had to hope and pray that they could crack before I was out. And so going into merge, that's definitely how we felt. We were just like, oh my god, we're screwed. And so I knew I wasn't going to go down without a fight. So basically, the second we merged up, everyone at merge, I was trying to rekindle my connections, rekindle them bonds, just make sure, hopefully, that I wasn't that first Karor boot because I was hoping strategy going with you longer. So that was just my focus. Let me just make sure and let me not be the.
Yeah, so I think that actually was the perfect mindset for Banjo to have because on my end, as someone who is at least partially dictating some of the votes on Oolong, it's hard to tell sometimes. But my main plan was it was someone who, for some reason, I mean, I guess just the marooning talks or whatever, I thought that Banjo might be someone who would be willing to work with on Karor because Dino and I did not have the strongest connection at marooning, and I effectively didn't fulfill and chop off the fragments with almost no resistance. So I was thinking keeping Banjo around at least till like F5 would probably be beneficial, but I wanted the other two Karor gone first. So I obviously tried to social game a bit with those three because they were new. I mean, that's just what you do. It's suboptimal if you don't. But notably with Dino, I mean, Dino's name was already for the most part somewhat dead in the water by the start of Merge. So like my talks with Dino were just kind of awkward. My talks with Nature were sort of like a little bit more reserved because I knew that I wanted personally Nature out because I saw him as a threat and I saw him as someone I think the main reason I saw Nature as a threat, as crazy as this is he solved that 209-piece jigsaw puzzle in like 40 minutes. Like that's ridiculous to me because I went super hard on that puzzle and I was 10 minutes off of him. So I saw Nature as a threat. I saw Dino as the boot, and I wanted to, that made it so I could connect with Banjo a bit better than other people. I started feeling like I was losing some connection with my Oolong people, so I tried to keep everything together with them, and I was really just looking at like how can I make sure I get to that final four rather than final two from the start of merge because I felt like from final four I could sort of pull something off.
So Leafy's mic died, so I guess we're doing this transition ourselves. So moving on, we had a social based challenge, which I was like, oh woo, a social based challenge where like 6 out of 8 of the 6 out of the other 8 people are probably just gonna lie to me. So I did try to screw everyone up because I lied to all 8 people about my number just to make sure nobody would leak it and so that everyone would be wrong. And I did end up second. I don't know if it was directly because of that, but I really, really wanted that merge immunity. because I didn't want to be the Koror to go. And this is the first in a very long series of me really, really, really wanting an immunity, and I don't win it because I never won a single challenge immunity the entire time. Half of that was because of this motherfucker Trey over here, but we'll get to that later.
Oh, we will get to that.
Yes, but okay, so Vitor wins this immunity, this individual immunity. So we go into F9 tribal, and spoiler alert, Dino ends up voted out 8-1, which Trey
Yeah.
set up. So basically, on the Koror side, what happened was Nature and myself and Dino were sitting in our alliance chat, and it literally felt like we were waiting to be told which of us were going to die. It's like all of us were, it's like the three of us were sitting on death row, and we were waiting for the U-longers to come up and tell us and call out one of our names, and then we were like, okay, that's the one of us that's gone. We knew that's how it was going to go down, and the U-longers basically ghosted us. Like none of y'all were
Yeah.
talking to any of us for like the first half of tribal, so we're like, oh, we're fucked. And
I
we're
think
just,
we were in the position of sort of just like we knew that you three were on death row and we wanted to keep up with that, but nobody wanted to be that executioner that's effectively just taking the machete to the like just person who can't even defend themselves. So it wasn't like trying, I think the ghosting actually heightened that, but it was as a result. So it became sort of this vicious social cycle. And I want to touch back for a second back to that challenge. I think almost no one on Oolong was really concerned about winning that challenge, which makes a lot of sense. But because it was a social challenge, it served as a vessel for pushing a social game. So for me, I did the opposite of Banjo. I told the truth to everyone, including all three Karora members, because I was in a position where I could do that. And I was just effectively spreading as much information as I could. I did not care who won the challenge. I actually wanted Nature to win the challenge in order to boost his threat level and in order to solidify the vote onto Dino. So it was a weird challenge in that the people who wanted to win the challenge were in a position they couldn't win the challenge. And then there were people who were, from some degrees, throwing the challenge but had a better chance of winning. So I thought that was pretty interesting about the coin challenge.
oh yeah, one other thing we should probably mention about the coin challenge is that Dino threw so hard. He basically put like
Oh,
2 coins and gave up altogether. So
that left a really bad taste in my mouth personally. I thought that was just a really bad mentality to have, especially since like you got second place. I mean, everyone on the entire tribe had a general idea of where those coins were going to be. So like why you aren't taking that 1 out of 9 chance whenever you could just take a 1 out of 9 chance to save your entire game and you just don't? I mean, that I think any chance of Dino saving himself was completely lost by throwing that challenge outright.
yeah, like basically at that point, I was talking with Nature and Dino in DMs as well. And when I would talk with Nature, we were both freaking out, but we were both willing to fight while freaking out. Whenever I would talk to Dino during that tribal, he was just completely dejected, like he was done. He just felt like he basically gave up at that point. So I don't remember which Yulong said Dino's name to us first. It actually could have been you, Trey. I actually don't know. I couldn't tell
That's
you. It all
probable, but yeah. I know I told everyone but Dino at some point that the vote was on Dino. I just don't know if I was the first.
it might have been actually maybe it was Becca. I don't know. The
I
point was that
yeah.
eventually, finally, we stopped getting ghosted, and they told us, "Hi, vote Dino or die." And we're like, "Oh, okay." um,
Gosh, that was such
so
a weird position to be in.
yeah, so we are just like, "Okay, I guess that was a vote." We did tell Dino, we're like, "The executioners picked you. We're so sorry." Dino was just done. He was like, "I don't even give a fuck. I'm just mad that they
Yeah.
ghosted me and didn't even try with
It
me or anything."
was quite literally just direct tribe lines too, because there wasn't anything complicated happening on the Oolong side. As I said, the challenge was a bonding experience, and I set up, or I forget who exactly made it, but I told someone to make it, and it was just the original Oolong tribe as an alliance, and that is where pretty much all of the game talk as the vote went down. And on the other side of the coin, you just have the original Karor tribe alliance just panicking. And I mean, it really was just a stark like meet your maker scenario, and it just we picked what we were doing and then we just delivered it down the line. And I don't know, there was something really just bad feeling about that tribal, but all of that feeling kind of went away once everyone realized Dino threw, because it was like, okay, if he's not even going for it, it doesn't really feel that bad anymore. So yeah, I think for the most part that would conclude F9.
Yeah. Dino ends up getting voted out 8-1. Who the hell did he even vote for? He voted for Becca, apparently. I don't even know why.
Yeah, he did. That was, I don't know.
One thing that I did notice from like his vote off, he was like really salty at all the U-longers, and Dino went to
Yeah.
jury. So I did immediately see
I
right there that I was like, okay, if a Karor somehow makes jury, he's
yeah.
probably voting for a Karor, and that's what ends
I
up happening.
immediately wrote off Dino's vote for every single person on Oolong except for Sophie, because I knew this. I don't think this continued through merge, but I know that at least in marooning that Sophie and Dino had good conversations. So if it came down to between me and another Oolong, and that other Oolong was Sophie, I was fairly confident that Sophie would get Dino's vote, considering that his jury perspective seemed to just be on whoever showed him the most game talk in the slightest.
All right, so and
I think
then
that leads us pretty cleanly into the next vote. My mic's working again.
Go.
Next episode, Trey wins immunity. Our homeboy Trey. And
Joey.
this seems to be a huge turning point for the season, this vote. Becca goes home.
Yes.
How did this happen?
I think I probably start this one off from Banjo, because I feel like at the start Banjo was still on death row, but on my end, starting all the way back at F18, we had Becca being wary of Vitor. And myself, one of my plans going to merge that I forgot to mention earlier was anytime I talked about Vitor, I would play him up as a threat, because I wanted, once people to start coming from me inevitably, because people always do, I wanted Vitor to be the one sort of like, they were like, oh yeah, Vitor's better. And he really helped that out a lot by winning the 2 random challenges that were social based, because that helped build up his threat level. But Becca wanted to start pulling a flip on Vitor. And within seconds, Sophie had relayed all the info back to the Mafia, because this is also when I was fairly confident. I went from being wishy-washy on where Sophie stood to, okay, Sophie's on our side. So we now had information that Becca was trying to organize a flip for F7 with Banjo. She wanted to kick out Nature and then take Banjo with the girls and start picking off the guys from Oolong. And as a guy from Oolong myself, I was like, well, that doesn't seem like a great plan. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, we need to start kicking something off now. And as I'm thinking that to myself, Sophie's like, what if we just flip now? And I'm like, yes, let's just do that now. So rather than giving Becca the chance to talk to Karor, we immediately went to Karor and we're like, hey, we're flipping. It's either you flip with us or we kill you. So pick your option here. And because Becca was the one who was sort of formulating the plans, the vote sort of started to fall into her. And I think the something else about the challenge was there was a disadvantage for the person who lost, and Becca was actually the person who got dead last. So she then had all of her chat terms removed and no chance to defend herself. So that sort of, in my eyes, solidified the vote. So I don't know what you were seeing on your end, but that's what we had going on.
Yeah, Exile Island was a huge factor because, again, Becca scored last in that challenge and only had her frog friend to join her on Exile Island. And that allowed everybody to sort of get the jump on her because she couldn't really, fight back in one-on-ones, and Becca ended up going, which was almost the start of a shift. Yeah, Banjo, what's up?
Yeah, sorry. So I'll hop in here sort of give my perspective. First off, gonna talk about the challenge real quick because this was the beginning. I would call this the beginning of Trey and myself having a bit of a rivalry with various challenge issues. This challenge was basically like a shark rock paper scissors where
I loved this challenge.
Yeah, this is a really good challenge, honestly. I really liked it. We had like 7 different sharks, and every shark was beaten by some sharks and got beat by other sharks. and we had to play them against each other. I won my first challenge against Taco. It was I won my first matchup against Taco. Sorry, it was pretty close, nearly tied, but I brought it back at the end. And then we played Trey, and I still haven't checked this, but I'm like 99% sure I were the
None
only
of the other.
matchup.
Yep, I
Yeah,
believe so as well.
Trey and I were the only matchup to ever tie. We had to do a redo because we tied up the first time straight up. And literally, Trey had me sweating so hard during that challenge. Like, I was taking 5 minutes because I was literally just repeating, like, muttering out probabilities like a madman, just going, okay, if he does this, then I can do this, but if he does that, then I can do that, but if he does that, then that cancels that, so I should do the first thing. And it turns out the trader was sitting there with a damn spreadsheet out doing the same thing, but like more clean.
I would like to say that to a degree, I was just as mentally defunct as you at that point. I was in my confessional just screaming my head off. I love doing that during challenges, but what made it even better is I know there were at least like 2 or 3 spectators reacting to it, and that was just fueling my fire. During that challenge, I felt like it was on some form of like gladiator stage, because like I knew that you, based off how you were playing, were fairly smart, and I'm on the other end, and I've got my spreadsheet doing all the calculations for me, and I was like, let's just do this. Like, I was so into it. I was so in the moment. I was paying no attention to anything around me in person, and it was really fun to go through. Coming back, because in the game that tied, you were up on me like 3-1, I think. It was 2-0 or 3-1. I knew I was crawling back from a deficit, and I came back from that. So yeah, that is where that rivalry definitely kind of started, I'd say.
All right, so Trey does, like Leafy said, Trey ends up winning that immunity, and then Nature and I. So first off, Trey said that he tried to get to us before Becca did. This did not happen. Becca talked to us first. Becca told me, I think actually, yeah, before the challenge ended, because when the challenge ended, she was exiled. So before the challenge even ended, I think after her first matchup, so in the middle of it, maybe even before I had my matchup with Trey, she came up to me and she was basically like, all right, listen, we don't want to fully pagong you. And I'm like, yes, save me. And she was like, okay, so here's what we're thinking. We're going to vote out Nature now. And I'm like, shit. And they're like, and you're like, no, wait, but listen, there's more. I have people. We have all the girls are going against all the boys. And I'm like, oh, okay, gender splits. This is totally new to Survivor and never happens. So she's like, okay. So she said all the girls, all the boys, and I did the math in my head. Like, okay, so Becca thinks she has Didi and Sophie versus Taco, Trey, Vitor. And I'd already sort of eyeballed it, and I had felt like from what I could see visually, I felt like Taco and Trey were really close together, but more like Trey was leading Taco, which I think was a pretty accurate assessment. And I felt like Vitor was involved in that as well. I did not know that Sophie was leaning toward their side. I thought Sophie was trying to play the middle between those three and between Becca and Didi, who I'd also pegged as a duo. So my reads at that point, for once in my life, were pretty good. I just didn't know where Sophie lay. So Becca was saying, okay, so we'll have Didi, we'll have Sophie, and then we can have you. We take majority, and we just take those ones out. And I was like, okay, this sounds like a pretty good plan. And then a little bit after that, I think that is when the other half of the Mafia comes to me. Wow, that sounds weird. I'm sorry. The Alphabet Mafia.
I can't get over that name.
The Alphabet Mafia comes to me, probably specifically Trey, actually. And he's like, or actually, no, I think it was Sophie.
I think it was Sophie, yes.
Yeah. And Sophie came to me, and Sophie's like, all right, so here's the situation. Taco and Trey and Vitor are on one side. Becca and Didi are trying to crack Oolong. We can go with the boys. She actually said the boys. Like, we can go with the boys. Save Nature now. Wipe out those two. And we can just keep playing them. And you and I can just keep playing the middle of the whole game. So Sophie, and I honestly, I never fully trusted Sophie that much, except maybe like right before she got booted. But just because Sophie didn't talk to me as much, I always got the feeling that maybe she was just talking to other people more than I did. I don't know if that was actually fully true or not, because I know that there are times where she literally just wasn't that active. But I could never figure out where her head was at almost the whole game. Like I never knew where her allegiances really lay. So I knew I didn't really want to like be at FTC with her, but I figured going deep with her or like going a few votes with her, that would be something that could be beneficial to my game and keep me alive.
Yeah.
So when she pitched that, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, we can go for Becca. That's going to be the easier pitch, and if you're not going to work with Becca, because that's what she thought. So then, but also I didn't want to just blindside Becca because I had this whole thing in my head about jury management, because I'm like, I'm really bad at jury management.
Oh, well, tell me
So,
about it.
and by the way, I know probably like Trey mad at it. The reason why I kept telling people, I constantly would tell people they were getting voted off right before they got voted off, because this was my sick idea of jury management, that I could tell them they're getting voted off and then say, "Oh my god, I'm sorry," and then they would like me on the jury. This is like my idea of how to jury manage. So, and also, I mean, I just legitimately didn't want to blindside a lot of these people because I really liked a lot of them. Like I liked Becca
Mhm.
as a person. I think Becca's a really cool person, so I didn't want to
Yeah.
blindside her. So she was like, okay, so we're probably going to vote out nature now. And I was like, we should come up with a code in case you get exiled. Because at this point, she was about to completely lose. It was her or nature. And I actually got this idea from nature, because nature was about to get exiled. And nature was basically my closest ally at this point by default. So he
Yeah.
said, we need to come up with a code in case I'm out. So that way we can talk. And so we came up with something that never came into play, where it was like, I would say, if I said I had slept well that night, that meant that the vote was good and you're safe. If I had said I had no sleep last night, that would have meant he was screwed. And then I would say, like, if I said like I had 1 hour sleep, 2 hours sleep, 3 hours sleep, and each number of hours would correspond to a different person on New Long. It was very intricate, and it never came into play, which was sad. But it actually gave me the idea to go to Becca and like, maybe we should make our own code. And so I went to her. She wasn't even online at the time, but literally like right before she got exiled, like that in that like hour, I think, I sent her a message like, okay, listen, we need a code in case you do get exiled. So here's the code. If I say I had a good breakfast, then you're good. Votes on nature. Everything's fine. If I say I skipped breakfast, it means the vote went to shit. That's exactly what I said. I said the vote
Yep.
went to shit. So that's what I told her. And at this point, I already knew that she was probably going to go unless they're going for a career and blindsiding me, which obviously I had no control over.
Yeah.
So Becca ends up exiled. We go to tribal. Eventually they make an alliance called Pagong, which is that is some not funny irony, dude.
That was me. That was me.
Yes.
Because that was the point where my Pagong plan fully died. So I was sitting in Western Civ and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be funny right now. And I don't know how funny it actually was, but I made that. I think there's
Yeah.
two things left from my end to talk about this vote before you finish, before we get like too ahead of this. But one thing was Sophie was the one who was talking to you about the vote. I know I was at least a little bit, but I know that she was the one who was talking to you the most, and I immediately knew that I was a little less trusting of Sophie being with you because I wanted to work with both of you and I didn't want you two working together. So that was something that sort of I had mentally noted by this point in the game now that I needed to split you two up a little bit more. And another thing was I considered at the time Dee Dee the bigger threat to make it to the end than Becca. So I don't know if you were about to start talking about this, but at least in Banjo and I's one-on-one, we were actually trying to see if we could get the vote onto Dee Dee instead, just sort of like as like a thought experiment almost. I think you said something about you wanted to see if you actually had power over Oolong to any degree. And me going along with you wasn't actually just me sort of just going along with you. I was to a degree, I was fairly indifferent, but I was actually leaning towards wanting to vote Dee Dee in that scenario because I also thought that Sophie was closer to Dee Dee and Vitor was closer to Dee Dee. So
Yeah.
that was sort of my idea, and that never came to fruition. But I think that that was an interesting thing that maybe connected Banjo and I a little bit more. And I mean, I think that the real connection started at F7, but I think that might have laid down some of the framework.
Yeah, definitely. That was actually something I was gonna forget to mention, that when we made the Pagong alliance, which had everyone but Becca and Dee Dee, because that was the duo, and I wanted to push that towards Dee Dee Trey made it sound a lot nicer than I should. Trey said the way I should have said at FTC instead of what I actually said at FTC. So Trey was saying, "Oh yeah, just trying to see if he had any power at all on Yulong." In my head, it was just I need a move to put on my resume so I can look good. And I was like, "This is the closest to a move that I'm probably ever gonna get to do if I could just literally like minusculely push it from Becca to Didi, which is inconsequential to no one." So I was very timidly in the Pagong. I told it to Trey first, and she was like, "I might actually be down for that." I'm like, "Wait, maybe this can work." I go to the Pagong
Sadly.
Alliance. Hey guys, why are we voting Becca and not Didi? And just Sophie and Vitor immediately just completely shut down any idea of
Yeah.
voting Didi. Like, no, we're voting Becca. And I was like, damn it.
Yeah, it
So
confirmed a lot of my suspicions, but I knew that it was not worth trying to push off of that because I knew that Becca already wanted our heads on a platter. I later realized that I had accidentally sort of ticked Becca off. I was, when Becca and I came up for like the rivalry thing, like the best rivalry, I was like, what? Like, I didn't have a problem with Becca. And I later realized that I made a comment about the shark challenge, saying something along the lines of I didn't understand the complexity of the game until the second round I played. Because when I initially played with Becca, I didn't have the spreadsheet ready. And I didn't really understand as much as, or actually, no, I had the spreadsheet ready, but did I? I don't know. I didn't have my full strategy prepared by the time I played with Becca. So my win against her felt a bit more random. It wasn't on my end like a comment to sort of like talk down Becca's however she played in the challenge. It was more like, oh, I'm sort of lucky I was able to beat you. Like it was actually the opposite intended effect. But from her confessional, I think that that was a point where she really wanted to get me out of the game faster than I would have liked. So I was happy with both options at the F8 vote, essentially.
yeah, I didn't really try to push anything because like I'm not in a position of power. I did tip off Becca with my little code. I said I skipped breakfast in the chat, and if I immediately got super thrown off because she immediately the second after that she started talking with Didi about the goddamn weather, and I was like, nobody talks about the weather, not even old people. Like, I mean, I say old. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
over the age of 18. Like nobody actually talks about the weather
legal
like
adults.
this. Yeah, and I think I even might have mentioned this. I mentioned this to Nature for sure. I might have even mentioned it to like Trey because I was like
I,
really
you
suspicious
you
about it.
did mention it to me actually. I remember talking about this.
Yeah, I was like, are they talking with the second that code? I was like so sure, and Becca did confirm after the season that yeah, that was a code to tell Didi that something was wrong. Which I don't know if that ever tipped Didi off that she was getting blindsided at tribal. I don't actually know. Um, but
Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah,
I,
I wanted to tell Didi about the Becca vote, but I also didn't want to risk it because I didn't want Didi to start making some crazy shit happen. So I figured I could just
yeah,
damage control
heck,
that.
yeah. So I think that's sort of where F8 ended. We went a lot into detail on that one, but I mean, we are
Yeah.
getting to that point in the game. I think F7, I don't know if Leafy wants to head this off, but I have a pretty good story about how F7 started for
No, go
me.
for it. You guys, I'm just here to guide the conversation. You guys
Okay,
go for it.
so F7 started, and I was sitting in a position where I was like, damn, this game has felt really easy. Like, even like I had just pulled off a blindside and it felt effortless. I was like, what's going on? Like, it can't be this easy. So I did something I usually do when I play an RG. I learned it in sociology class, and it's called the sociological imagination. And really, all it is, it's a fancy term for stepping in other people's shoes, but not just one person's shoes, everyone's shoes. So I was in my confessional, I'm going through, I'm like, where is everyone else's heads at in this game? Because nobody thinks they're losing. Everybody thinks they have a path to the end. What could that path be? What are they trying to do? So I ran through everyone and I'm like, okay, we've got Banjo, who is desperately trying to get back into the game from my minority, looking for any help possible. He just got back with people from our tribe, and he's probably looking to make a move to put on his resume in order to get to the end with something to show for it. And I was like, I'm possibly a person that that move could land on because my head has somewhat of a bounty amongst talking to people that could be dangerous. And I slowly went through the line of everyone in the game, and I was like, shit, it is perfect for almost everyone in this game to take me out F7. And I was like, this is not good. I knew before any talk F7 happened that if I was anyone else in the game, I would have thrown my own name out. So I was really worried going into F7. And after I lost that competition, I was virtually AFK for the entirety of the F7 competition because, first of all, it required me to be active like 10 total minutes. And second of all, I had a ton of tests that day. But when it came to the actual F7 tribal portion of it, I was really worried about my name. And 3 seconds later, or something, not 3 seconds, that's hyperbole, but very shortly after, I got a message in the I forget which alliance. We actually had an alliance called I Ain't Never Seen Three Pretty Best Friends, which was just Alphabet Mafia minus Taco. And I think that's where I got the message, but they were like, yeah, your name has been thrown out. And that was sort of the moment where I think my game kicked from a position of power into a position of like high gear. So yeah, I don't know what you have to say on the expedition of this travel, but I'll get into more of the details of how I did that after you do what you want to talk about.
Sure. I'll just very briefly go over the challenge, which was basically um this version of touchy subjects. It was like an interesting way to do touchy subjects because you couldn't answer the same person for multiple questions, and it was like put in like a bracket format, and people had to choose what questions will go forward. Honestly, I've never really been a person to put a whole lot of stock into touchy subjects. I know some people like hyper-analyze those answers and try to read a lot off of it, but I feel like usually it generally comes down to where you can probably tell like one of two or three people get an answer, and it almost always happens. It's been very rare that I've been like legitimately surprised by someone getting an answer to a touchy subject question, and I that was the case here where I feel like most of the people that got where they were, I was like, Trey and Vitor will probably get like that brain power, FTC, challenge performance, two of that trio, and I'll probably be shunted into like a friend trust kind of thing. I don't know. So it was like it all felt like pretty sensible. I didn't put a lot of stock into it. Vitor ended up giving himself immunity, which I think is pretty funny because he gave himself immunity by making the person that wins all the challenges win. So that's like
Yeah,
irony on three
that
different
was very
levels.
poetic. I love that actually. And
That's
I'm
pretty
gonna
cool.
agree with you real quickly because in other ORGs, personally, touchy subjects has probably been my worst challenge. I usually do pretty well in it, but I almost never win it, and I've gone out to touchy subjects before multiple times, I think. But it's another one of those challenges, like I agree, there's so much going into it, but when you really boil it down, it is just what most people assumed. And I wasn't surprised by the competition results at all. I woke up and I saw the brains and the challenge beast being the last two, and I was like, okay, Vitor is winning this immunity. There's literally no way it's not one of us, and I just didn't really care. So I think that I have to agree with pretty much everything you said on the challenge.
All right. So going into this tribal, man, things were wonky as hell. So, the way the tribal works was I immediately saw, okay, Didi's on the bottom, which and Koror is on the bottom by default, no matter what. We're on the bottom basically the entire merge because you can't help that we're Koror. So I was like, okay, you Didi, you can join our little bottom gang, and then there's three of us. We get one person in, and we have majority, and we're gold. And she seemed pretty sold with that. And apparently, our one person in seemed to be Sophie because Sophie was the one that kept talking to me like she wanted to work with me. So I started talking to Sophie. So I was like, okay, so here's what I'm thinking, Sophie. We don't vote out any of DD Nature myself, obviously, not me. And so that way we're holding the majority. We can't vote out Vidor because he's immune. So that leaves us with Trey or Taco. And Sophie was like, I want to vote out Taco because I don't know a lot about him. And this confused the hell out of me, I won't lie, because like my view of Taco was I don't want to say I saw him as a goat because I didn't see him as a goat, but I saw him as someone that would be easy to beat at FTC. I saw him as someone that was mostly kind of relying on his allies, and if we just kind of picked off his allies mainly, I felt like he was really closely allied with Trey. So I was like, if we can just take Trey out, Taco's empty, and maybe somehow by some miracle, even though their tribal lines breaking that apart, I can scoop them, and then I'll have Taco, and then that'd be golden. I can take it to FTC, and that'd be someone I feel like I can beat if somehow I ever ended up in a power position, that is. And I felt like maybe taking out Trey at that time would be helpful towards taking it out. So I was like, maybe, Sophie, what if we just went for the really big threat that everyone thinks is a big threat, Trey? And naturally, Sophie immediately goes to Trey, hey, your name has been thrown out. and,
Actually, I think there was a little bit more to this, but keep going with what you were saying.
that's what I thought happened. Turns out there's more to the story, but that's what, in my head, that's what happened basically.
Yeah, I think what. Go ahead, just finish.
So
this is weird.
yeah, sorry. Let me just get to the part where then you can sort of get to
Yeah.
Well, I'm speechless. So I was trying to push Trey, and honestly, I did feel like both Nature and Didi would have preferred Trey, just because I think we both kind of felt like you were a bigger threat than Taco was. So when I was talking to them, and they're like leaning Trey as well. But I was talking to Sophie, and Sophie really wasn't budging. Sophie was like, I want to go for Taco. And eventually I just said, screw it, I don't think she's gonna budge here. And I told Nature and Didi it sounds like we're gonna have to go for Taco here. And then I go to Trey's DM, and I'm just doing some mild social gaming with Trey. No, actually, no, not social gaming. Sorry, we were talking about the vote. So we're talking about the vote a little bit, and I'm talking about the vote with him very methodically, very big brain like, because so I was like, okay, look, we can't vote either of us out. That leaves 5. We can't vote Vitor out. That leaves 4. Please, please, please don't vote Nature out. That's 3. I don't think we should vote Didi out here because she's a free number, and someone has to scoop her, so might as well be us. So that's 2, and it leaves Sophie and Taco. And we explored both of these options, and we did this. And I was like, "What about Sophie?" And Trey discussed a little bit about voting Sophie. Trey never said he wanted to vote Sophie, but he entertained it with me. I don't think he ever actually entertained the idea, but he entertained it with me, so to speak. So I was like, okay, time to use this to get Sophie to vote Trey in my very small, but what I thought was very big brain. So I go to Sophie, and I'm like, let me exaggerate this. Hey, Sophie, Trey threw your name out. And that got around. And then, so we're talking about this, and eventually we move off of Sophie. Sophie was never going to happen anyway. And we're like, okay, so we're pretty settled on Taco. And I'm like, okay, so we're settled on Taco. And then all of a sudden, Trey's like, let's cut the bullshit. I know you're going for me. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to him.
So I think this is a good part for me to jump in, because when the conversation with Banjo started, and I'd say this is probably at least in the top 3 most important conversations of the season, if not the most important conversation of the season, judging as it probably had some of the most bearing as both of us making it to FTC. When the conversation started, I was being 100% disingenuous. I meant virtually nothing I was saying. I was just trying to see if Banjo was willing to tell me outright that he wanted to vote me, because I knew at that point from Sophie, or Banjo told Sophie told Vitor first, they discussed it, and I'm assuming they decided that it was okay to tell me. Once they told me, I knew I was going to start picking away at this mess that I'd found myself in. So I just wanted to sort of survey the scene, initiate some sort of conversation, and I was like, I want to get Banjo to throw out any name other than myself first. That is plan number 1. We need to get some sort of other name in the water. So as Banjo said, we went down one by one, and I was just agreeing with this, oh, we can't take out Nature. And I'm like, oh yeah, we definitely can't take out Nature, the person I see as the biggest threat and I don't really talk to about the game at all. That would be stupid for my game. And we go down, and we get to 2 of my closest allies, and I'm like, wow, look at these 2 great appetizing names for me to take out. How much fun. And I forget why we picked Sophie over Taco, but we did. And once Banjo said that, I was like, oh, perfect. I can go tell Sophie that Banjo threw his name, because I did not know where Sophie fully lied, because I was worried that Sophie could see I knew that from my thing before that Sophie taking me out was honestly really smart for her. So I'm like, oh, perfect. So I decided to start a conversation with Sophie to see if I can tell her this. And I say, hey, so how much do you talk to Banjo? Sort of like a coy lead in to get her to like think that she can trust him and then flip the script. But the funny part was her response just shattered all dreams of this by, I believe it was exactly enough to know that you threw my name out. And I think I laughed out loud when I heard this because like, oh boy, we got to clean up in aisle three here. Um, I started basically explaining the entire conversation with Banjo from my perspective about how I'd been lying the entire time. And at that point, I realized the more I work this, the more I can start to put up this wall between Sophie and Banjo that I was worried about forming an alliance between those two. So I'm working both sides of the conversation at this point. And once I'd gotten Sophie to a point where Sophie seemed adequately mad at Banjo, I was like, hey, can I go confront Banjo about this? Because, like, I feel betrayed. Like, I thought Banjo was my ally. I am just devastated right now. And Sophie gave me the go ahead. So I go to Banjo and I'm like, all right, let's start talking. I know you're voting me. Let's figure something out here. So the last option on the menu was taco, and I did not want to vote taco out. I would say this 100 times over again, but my life was on the line here, so it was pretty much the obvious choice. Um, but I did see Taco as someone who I could use to help dismantle the mafia later on. I wasn't sure who Taco was closest with from the Mafia, but I was going to try and get closer to Taco. It was sort of one of my plans. And I do agree that it didn't seem like anyone in the game respected his game as much as maybe they should have. But I also felt that regardless, I was playing a stronger game, so I'd be perfectly happy sitting next to him final two, especially since he was an original Oolong, and that's definitely a plus. So taking out taco wasn't the best option, but I mean, meat was on the menu. It was just whatever was getting the job done at that point. So I had then broke the conversation with Banjo. We're now full on board Taco. We're talking with Sophie and Vitor, and they're like Taco. And I knew that Dee Dee had been wanting Taco out since like whatever it was, F13 or something, at least to a degree, because she knew that he was with us. So I was like, I know that this is going to work for virtually everyone in the game. And despite it not being a smart play, I've now somewhat set up a position where it's the only possible boot. So yeah, I thought that that conversation between Banjo and I was really significant because not only did it sort of break that wall of superficiality that would allow us to sort of work together more as the game went on, but it set up a bit of a rift between Sophie and Banjo. It made everyone sort of a little bit more weary of each other and less focused on me, and it just sort of set up a little bit more of an interesting game going into F6. So I don't know what your closing thoughts are on that vote, but
Uh,
that's about all I have.
just sort of one thing that I really want to emphasize about this conversation, because I definitely agree with Trey. This was a really, really key conversation in this game, I feel like, because, and another thing is established, and Trey mentioned this at when we're talking about F8, that this conversation was honestly the genesis of the sort of weird, like, it made no sense, but like the really close, that relationship that Trey and I had that we sustained for basically the entire merge, where we actually were like, we talked to each other pretty real. And I think we, and it was that conversation I feel like really cemented myself as an ally of him and really got me to switch in my head from I need Trey out to, and I suddenly realized Trey seems to be the only person that's willing to actually take me decently far in this game and not
Yeah,
just pagong my ass. So I
that
was
is one
like,
thing I forgot.
yeah,
I said I would be willing to take Banjo F2 at this stage in the game. And in my head, I was thinking, I'm not actually taking Banjo F2, but I think if I take Banjo F2, I could beat him because of how the merge had started going. And I was like, this might be a good promise to make to someone who nobody wants to take far. And I think that that definitely took some hold. And I think Banjo capitalized off of it as well, obviously.
yeah. And what I told Trey at that time, and I do think I was at least partially true in the regard that I was like, if you, well, maybe not partially true, but I just feel like there was something true that if you pagonged Koror, you end up the biggest threat left. That much I do think is true. That if Koror was gone, Trey should have, at least in my opinion, been seen as the biggest threat left. And then I told him, and you're going to get voted off because of that. I don't know if he actually would have been voted off because of that, because again, Trey was a lot more well connected than I thought he was. But I did feel like that I told Trey that we could just use each other as shields. I'm a shield for literally anyone in existence because I'm a Koror. You can be a shield for me, and we need to keep each other alive because if one of us goes, the other one's probably going to go right after. And I didn't fully believe that. I was like, if Trey goes, maybe I can survive. If I go, maybe Trey can survive. But I did feel like it was at least partially true. And so that's where we sort of set the seeds for that really close relationship between us.
I want to finish that off with one more thing now that you said it. But whenever you said the if I go, you're going next, and if you go, I'm going next thing, that's funny because that's almost the exact same words that I used at that exact same, I think it was that exact tribal just beforehand to Vitor. And I was like, we're both seen as threats. If one of us goes, the next one's just going to go right after. And that was sort of what was keeping my relationship with Vitor alive, at least in my mind. I mean, we obviously don't have Vitor's perspective here, but I think that one of the things that's defined my game, at least somewhat, and this one specifically, but in sort of a lot of ORGs, is just sort of threat management. And I think that that was a tactic that I employed with a few people this season. And that was, I think F7 was sort of the height of that, just sort of that domino effect type threatening phrase. And that sort of puts the pressure on both people in a relationship, and it's able to set up even adversarial relationships that are still close allies. And I think that's what Banjo and I ended up becoming.
Yeah, for sure. And what's funny was that after all of this, the vote itself ended up feeling almost pretty easy because once Trey and I got all that out of the way, it was like, oh yeah, so it's Taco, right? Yeah, and everyone basically got on board with Taco. And about the most interesting thing about the vote itself was that it took place at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why.
I don't remember that, but yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, the only vote I remember the timing of is F5, but we'll get there shortly enough.
No, yeah, I do
And
remember it because like I was up really late for some reason. It was literally 1 o'clock in the morning, and the final vote came in. I don't remember who the last vote was, and then we're like, and a lot of us were online at the time because I guess we just don't sleep, and we're like, "Hey, May, can you read?" And May's like, "You want
okay,
us
I
to
do
read
remember this
now?"
now. Yep, I remember this
And we were
now.
like, "Yes." It was so, and Taco. I don't know if Taco's legitimate. Taco seemed pretty surprised to go.
I don't think he had any inclination he was going at all.
Yeah, when I talked to Taco, we just basically were like, "Okay, we're gonna vote nature, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure,
I
not."
I had assumed that Taco had been flipping with Didi because I was like, what else could he be doing? Because like during that tribal, I had stopped talking to Taco almost entirely because I felt like both of our lives were on the line, and he was the conversation that was least important to my game because I felt like no matter what, one of us was going. So I was a little confused. I assumed that Taco was voting me. So that was a bit surprising.
Oh, and one last thing. I'm sorry, we've been making this tribal go really long, but this actually has nothing to do with the tribal. But it was this tribal where I decided to do my really weird idea of because Um, I did find out a couple orgs ago that some org hosts actually let you change the name of a DM if you ask them nicely enough. So I was in a chat with Dee and I misspelled sweet as sweal, and she thought it was really funny. And I was like, TML, you should change the chat name to Sweal. And TML changed the name to Sweal TML Best Host, which I didn't tell him to do that part. But then that came up with an idea. What if I just changed the name of every one of my chats to be named after a different host? And I thought so. I was like, I can change all my names to be after different hosts. It's kind of funny. It was kind of funny to me if I could pull that off. And furthermore, I just felt like usually I found that when you change the name of a chat, it works as some kind of like social game thing where people think, oh yeah, this person's close to me. They even changed the chat name special and all that. So I went and I changed all my different chat names to be named after different hosts. Each one was named after a different host. I did all the executive producers and all the producers. I wish I could have done all the co-producers, but I didn't have enough chats to do it. my favorite name, which I'll say exclusively for this podcast, was in fact my name with Trey, which was, I don't even know how to say it out loud, Jacks of all Trey, bzzz, because it was named after Jack. I didn't know if he would actually be sold to name after Jack, but I was like, we can make it like Jacks of all trades, but then Jacks of all Trey, because that's like your name. And he's like, we had to put my name in it too, so we added a B to the end. And then they originally put Jacks of all Trabe, which was singular, and I'm like, TML, you had to put an S at the end, and then he added like 17 S's at the end, which is why that happened. And so that's one of my little minor thing. Has literally nothing to do with the game. I just think it's kind of funny. Taco gets voted off 6-1, one vote being for nature. And I guess, Leafy, you want to lead into the next vote?
Yeah, thank you. So after the taco vote, the end game sort of starts as we wind down with our final 3 episodes of 13, 14, and the finale. In episode 13, DD wins immunity, and this seemed to be a pretty decisive vote, 5-1 with nature going home. Was this pretty cut and dry at this point? Did you guys already have your end games planned out and nature wasn't a part of them? Like, what constituted this?
Hold on. You don't get to just skip to tribal and not let us
Oh,
bash that hell of a challenge real quick. The
I don't
fucking
know
I
what
like
you
this
mean.
mentality.
I
I
don't know what you
love
mean.
this mentality.
I don't know what you mean. What challenge are you talking about?
So this challenge, Leafy was like, okay, so here's the challenge. We'll do a blind maze where everyone
Yeah.
can add walls to the maze privately.
It was a great challenge. I loved it.
You know your walls, but you don't know anyone else's walls.
You know it's a bad challenge when it has graph lines, and I didn't like it.
It was a great challenge. It was funny.
It was
And-
funny from a third-person perspective.
It was very funny to watch. You bash
First
your head
off-
in the walls.
First off, one thing that I felt was kind of sad about a challenge was like Leafy was like, to make this challenge not RNG, any of you can talk about the challenge in a public chat and you can say anything you want about any of the walls that you put.
Yep.
Crickets. No one said
Yeah, that's not my fault. You guys are just bad.
I was way too cocky at that point. I thought my strategy was just infallible.
Everyone thought they were going to win, so no one said anything. Everyone's like, oh, I'm good. And then everyone did it, and they're like, oh, I'm not good.
Yeah, that was really funny.
And then you didn't want to help anyone else because you had just failed. It was like you and Nature were like, oh, I'm good. And you and I think Vitor too. And then you guys all did horribly, and you're like, oh, never mind.
I want Trey to tell his story about the challenge because it's going to be funnier than mine.
I mean, it's funnier to a degree, probably just because I wasted more time on it. So I actually had the day of this inception. I was in a very weird mood this day. So I had been up late the night before because I was playing a speed. That's actually where the whole aerial thing originated. That's completely irrelevant to this conversation, but I had gotten voted out in that, so my spirits were ridiculously low. And I had to wake up at like ungodly 30 to go to a science competition the next day. So I spent all day at this science competition that was over a Zoom or whatever. And that's fine by me. But
Nice.
Finally get a chance to sit down and look at this competition. And there were already 5 out of 6 in. And I'm like, oh, geez, I was exhausted. I had my spirits were low. I hadn't even looked at the rules. So I sit down and I look at it. I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of interesting. And I started getting pretty into it. And it was sort of like raising my spirits to a degree. And I start running through the numbers.
It's a good challenge.
For now. So I start running through the numbers. I'm like, oh, paths of 9, shelling out the probabilities. We're going to make it so it's perfect. And then I'm going to channel it properly. I had everything correct. And I'm like, as long as someone just doesn't make like a random wall, there's no way that this strategy can lose. Unfortunately for me, 2 people made a random wall. So all of the just morale that I had built up just kept just crushing down tenfold every time I slammed into these dead end corners. I hit, I think, every
Fun
dead
fact,
end.
Trey found all of them.
Yeah,
Trey found every single dead end and pretty much back to back too, which was funny to watch because he's like, oh, okay, cool. Now I know where the dead end is, so I can't hit it again. And then he went directly and navigated the quickest way possible to the next dead end. And then he went from that dead end to the third dead end.
Yeah,
It was very funny. Good time.
It was absolutely miserable on my end, and I finished that competition with zero morale. I luckily was doing something fairly fun that night. If it wasn't for that, I probably would have just gone to bed just in tears. Like, oh, I was in such a bad mood. But yeah, that competition ended. I got way too cocky about it, and I think that's about it for it. Dee got a nice immunity there, and I think her strategy ended up being very smart.
Dee and Sophie were the only ones that aren't like, hey, point A to point B, I'm gonna go in a straight line, because Dee was smart, and Dee's walls she set up were literally, she made a straight line from the top to the finish on the right side. So that's what everyone found except for Dee and Sophie. Everyone kept bashing their head into that because that was a very good wall from Dee.
It was very, very smart.
Yeah.
So that was, in my opinion, a very deserved immunity. But it put my head back on the menu along with everyone else. So,
fun challenge, yay.
Yeah.
So after that conclusion of the fun challenge that, again, I did give you an opportunity to all talk about, which none of you felt you needed. So I just wanted to put that out there. All of you felt confident in how you did up until you did it, and then didn't want to help anyone else out of spite. Anyways, so Dee wins immunity, and Nature goes in a 5-1 vote, with Nature voting Vitor on the way out. Again, same question stands. Was he not a part of your guys' endgame?
I think I'll start this one off because this is actually exactly when I planned my endgame. I forget if it was the end of F7 or the beginning of F6. I went through in my head, I was like, I've gone from a position of almost going out the door to maybe possibly being in power if I play my cards right here. And the wild card was actually Dee because ever since the Becca blind side, my social game with Dee had been atrocious. I was honestly too nervous to DM her at times. It didn't feel good taking out somebody's number one ally without even talking to them about it in advance. I didn't really have a fallback plan for Dee. I was kind of expecting her to go out F7 before the whole explosion. So we were on weird terms, and I sort of just came to her. I made a plan first in my head. I was like, if we can go like take out Nature now, because Nature probably might win some competitions. I was actually more worried about Nature winning competitions than Vitor, which is something that I don't think most people were. But again, the puzzle challenge F13 had me weary of Nature a lot. And both of Vitor's competition wins were social competition wins, so I did consider Nature the bigger challenge threat. So I wanted Nature out. I also wanted Vitor out because I knew it was getting to a point that it was late in the game, and he was definitely someone who played at least similar type game and somebody who was, I thought, more liked than me. So I talked to Dee and I was like, hey, I know that you probably don't really trust me much, and I know that you probably trust Banjo because he's on the bottom. What if like we made like a thing here where we take out Nature here because he's a threat and he's on Karor and we don't want to let that fester or whatever, and we flip it back and we take a dejected Banjo and we turn it on Vitor and Sophie and take out one of them, and then we flip it back again and take out Banjo F4, and then we flip it back again and take out the remaining person between Sophie and Vitor, and suddenly we're in the final two. And I don't know exactly what part of this convinced Dee, and I know I made the conversation a bit more organic. I started out with something a little bit more primitive, like we need to work together, and then I slowly started talking my way up to that plan. But I was really trying to sculpt out the end game here in a way that was super favorable for me. And I felt like if I wanted it to be favorable for me, I needed to work with Dee. So that's sort of where my head was at that tribal, and I was still fairly set on Nature because of just the original Karor tribe line things. We hadn't really been working tightly together, and I saw him as a challenge threat. So I don't know where your head was at, Banjo, but that was where I was at.
So F6 was honestly a really big wake-up call to me because honestly, that was probably the biggest point in the game where I got fucking stupid. Um, so remember, I walk into merge, and I had that whole mindset of every tribal that I'm surviving is basically a blessing from the survivor gods that I somehow made it past another tribal when I should have been pagonged out. But by going into F6, there have been 2 Oolongs voted out. and there were still 2 Corors left. So I think this is when I was on a little bit of a high walking in where I was like, hey, maybe I'm actually in a position of power.
Banjo was high.
Oh, shut up. Maybe I was in power. I had people that are allies. Maybe I could even make some moves, make some control. And all that comes crashing down when Trey was like, all right, we're voting nature. Everyone's voting nature. You don't have much of a choice here.
Well,
Vote him or die. And I was like, shit.
that was actually a little bit more true because every single person other than nature left in the game had said Banjo to me as the name. And I was like, no way, Jose. Because after F7, even if it wasn't strategically sound, which luckily it was, I felt at least somewhat emotionally responsible to protecting Banjo for at least one tribal because he protected me F7. And after I heard Didi, Sophie, and Vitor come to me in fairly quick succession saying the vote should be on Banjo, I was a little bit worried. And I started having to work to flip that onto nature. So by the time that I did end up coming to Banjo and sort of shattering his confidence, I knew that it was sort of, it's either going to be you or nature, and we need to make sure that it's on nature.
Yeah, so I did really think about it. I was like, okay, that's when I realized at the end of the day, we're still Koror, but we're still on the bottom, and it woke me up to that. And I realized, yeah, okay, if I had to vote out nature to survive, that's what I have to do. I don't have control in the matter, which honestly, this was the theme of my entire merge that it is true that I think it's a pretty fair bash that I probably kind of got FTC that I didn't have a lot of control directly over some of these votes. Like I could have very, very easily gone here if it wasn't for Trey. My entire destiny in the F6 vote was basically entirely out of my hands, but I did survive it. And I guess that's where you can sort of get into semantics of how much a social game should be credited where. Oh, so is this the legendary computer fan?
Oh shoot! Yeah, sorry. So
Race car.
let's yeah. This might become a theme as we continue with this podcast. But my AirPods did die, so I am now on my computer. If you hear a plane crashing, a nuclear reactor starting up, or the fall of the Berlin Wall,
I'm just going to assume that's
it's just my
Banjo
computer.
after eating tacos and farting a little too much. So,
Oh,
Wait, hold
sounds
on.
great.
I didn't
that a
eat
good
taco. I
segue?
voted taco.
is that a good segue to episode 14?
Wait. I'm nearly done.
Oh,
Wait,
sorry.
so
Go on.
basically, okay. Long story short, the point was that I didn't realize I was kind of on the bottom here. I didn't have much room to move. I did tell nature
Bottom.
that he was. Jeez. I did tell nature that he was a vote. Nature did scramble pretty hard, which I respect. He didn't just give up. He kept fighting all the way to the very end. He tried to flip the votes onto Trey, and I was like, man, that is not the way to do it. Like, if you're trying to flip the votes, Trey is not the direction to go there. I want to like shake him, like, no. If you want to flip the votes, do it to like, I don't know, Vitor. That's the way to go. Maybe then, but even then, like Didi and I kind of strung him along a little bit, and then just kind of shot him down. Like, no, it's not happening. You're done. And one thing that I did actually feel a little bit better about was having another Korora on the jury, because I did feel like nature might be more inclined toward voting me if I somehow got to FTC. So I did feel like in that sense, it would be a little bit better for me.
Kurogo Burr.
I guess the last thing about that tribal would be nature's really sort of fight at the end there because it set up the final rift between Vitor and I to a degree. I mean, I obviously didn't believe almost anything nature was saying about Vitor, and I know that Vitor probably was not believing anything said about me wanting Vitor out from nature. Nature was just sort of trying to like put the Titans into a headbutt or something from his perspective. From what I heard after, Vitor was doing some of that stuff pretty consciously to try and see how well he could trust some of the Corona members to take me out somewhat soon. So I think that really does, while it didn't benefit nature at all, it did end up setting the stage for a pretty tumultuous F5.
And that seems like the best transition we'll get. F5, episode 14. Sophie wins immunity. And Vitor goes home in a 3-2 vote. That's as close as it gets. And I mean, this seems to pave the path for the rest of the season in the end game and the finale episode right after this. But what happens here? I think Sophie won the challenge that was
It was the
reverse
reverse.
emoji
It
order,
was like
right? And then they
reverse
had to
the
do the
Yeah.
puzzles.
emoji, and then some pretty simple jigsaw puzzles. It was probably the most straightforward challenge we had the entire damn game.
Yeah,
Um,
I enjoyed it, even though I didn't do too well on it. But
Yeah, I had a good talented. I think I did basically as well as I could have. Sophie definitely earned that win. I never
Sophie
could have
killed the
gone that fast.
puzzles.
Yeah,
I,
I talked to one of my friends afterwards about it, and I realized that some of my strategies for that competition were not good. I could have optimized it a lot more. But it is what it is.
It is what it is. So, with Sophie winning immunity, she's off of the table to vote. So Vitor goes in a 3-2 with both Sophie and Vitor voting for our man Trey on the way out. This seems to be a pretty big vote, huh?
Yeah. So I guess I should probably start here. Again, I had this plan in place with Didi where we were already going to vote either Sophie or Vitor. And now that Sophie had been immune and Vitor was already the prime focus of that sort of flip, in my opinion, I think at this point in the game, my ideal final three was myself, Didi, and Sophie. But we had flipped the vote, or we were planning on flipping the vote onto Vitor, and in DMs, everyone was saying Banjo, or at least like in the previous alliance chats, like I had seen three pretty best friends. It was just like, okay, yeah, we can't let another Karor get any farther. Easy vote. And the thing is, the tone of just speech on both sides was very, very weird. I didn't get the immediate vibe that they were voting me, but it sort of festered quickly, and I'll get into what gave me the vibe when Banjo finishes talking about his initial impressions about F5.
oh yeah, so walking into F5, I did feel like I had a pretty good grasp of where the lines were drawn here. At that point I had felt pretty comfortable with Trey, and I felt pretty comfortable that Trey was going to go that Trey would be willing to go up against Vitor here. So I was like, okay, you and me, we're good on Vitor. Sophie and Vitor, I figured they were going to vote together as well because I had seen them at that point. I had finally figured out that they seemed to be like a duo to me. So I figured they were going to either both vote for me or both vote for Trey, and they both told me that they were going to vote for Trey, and I bet they both told Trey that they're going to vote for me. So I was like, okay, so it just depends whoever they're telling the truth to, and I think they ended up telling Didi that they're voting for Trey. So that's how that worked out. And I did see Didi as a swing there. So pretty early on that tribal, I did go talk to Didi I didn't have a lot of power, obviously, but I just figured just to convince her. And that's when Didi told me something really interesting when she was discussing whether we should vote for. We're talking as if whether we should vote for Trey or vote for Vitor. And in reality, I was like, maybe you should just go vote for Vitor, not that I have any power here. And she was like, I honestly don't see Trey as much of a threat in this game. And I thought that was really interesting. She basically said that like everyone's been scared of Trey the whole game, but I don't feel like he's done much of anything. And I don't know if she said that to me to BS me or if she really meant it, but that really ticked me off. Something that I kept thinking that if I somehow end up at FTC with Trey, there's no way I could beat him. But now I was thinking about it, I was thinking from what I knew, and I think in reality, he traded a lot more than I thought he did. But from what I knew, Trey had done not really much of anything. And when I thought about it, I realized if you go to the genesis of almost all the votes, they all seem to be coming from Sophie. Sophie was the one to really push Becca in F8. Everyone kind of pushed Becca, but Sophie helped with that a lot by being in the middle. Sophie was the one that pushed Taco at F7, and Sophie, I didn't know this, but like I was like, okay, Sophie was good nature as well. So I was like, Sophie actually kind of feels like the most powerful player left in the game, and that freaked the hell out of me. I was like, I don't think anyone here could beat Sophie at FTC because she has just the most on her resume straight up. And that scared me. And she wanted immunity, so I was like, okay, well, I can't vote her out. So I was like, okay, well, then second best is Vidor. And so Didi told us that she was good with that. So I was like, I did feel like Didi would vote Vidor just because Didi had told me that about not being particularly scared of Trey. While she did say that she was more scared of Vitor. So I think maybe because of my innocence or naivete, I was a lot more confident with that Didi swing vote than maybe Trey or Sophie and Vitor were going into that.
Yeah, I think if I don't know how well you guys know me, I think maybe Leafy does because he has a bird eye perspective, but usually defined a bit by my
Yes,
blog.
sir.
So I don't even think there was a second I really thought I didn't have Didi because I just wouldn't let it like myself mentally admit it. I'd rather get blindsided almost. So yeah, I was pretty hardcore on board with it too. The point that I was feeling ballsy enough to talk to Sophie about voting Vitor. I didn't know who Sophie's number one was in the game. I assumed it was no one, which is why from F7 on, I kept trying to push myself into conversations that made Sophie feel like she was my number one. And this was definitely one of them. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, all right, Sophie, we got to set ourselves for the end game up here. We're dealing with some pretty big threats. We got Banjo, who's from Karor, which still somehow carried weight as a threat at F5, which I find a little ridiculous. I mean, the fact that people are even still bringing it up at FTC, I mean, like, kid, it's a story, but it's F5 in the game at this point. He's survived this long. I mean, there's other reasons he's a threat. And Vitor was just very visible. I mean, I don't think many people can explain why Vitor was a threat, and I think Vitor, he was saying he felt it was almost unfair that he was immediately labeled as a threat. I think there's just certain people that are, and he was one of them, and he's one of those people that people would just vote for at FTC. So I was like, so we've got quite a predicament on our hands. What if we vote Vitor now, and then because Banjo's spooky, scary Karor, Didi's has to vote with us F4. She has no other option. It would just be mind-boggling if she did not. So I pitched this to Sophie, and Sophie was sort of going along with it, but I noticed immediately that she kept like trying to deflect the conversation, and eventually the conversation died without reaching a conclusion. And in my eyes, a conversation dying without reaching a conclusion shows that somebody doesn't care about your opinion anymore. And so it was at that point that I knew that I was almost 100% going to be on the receiving ends of the final two votes. And I don't know if Banjo has anything else to speak on this tribal, because I think most of like the politics have gotten out of the way at this point. As it was announced that they were tallying the votes for tribal, I got a message from, well, actually, let's take this back like an hour or two. The whole Little Mermaid thing was still a little bit fresh in the air. So we decided we were going to watch The Little Mermaid, which the poeticism of this just gets unreal. So we're watching this movie, and it's like 11.
By we, you mean you and Sophie, I believe, right?
Correct. Yes, it was just us. We're watching this movie on a VC, and we're going through it, and I don't think either of us expected the vote to be finished that night. I think there was some tension because I think we both sort of felt weird vibes from each other, and we'd known each other for a bit before, so like we kind of knew. And we're watching the movie, and it gets to the point where Ursula turns like super huge and starts like destroying everything. And Sophie DMs me, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And for some reason, I replied with "Bon voyage." I don't even know what I was thinking. Like, I don't know what "Bon voyage" really means. I don't even know if it's like I don't know, but I said "Bon voyage" like I was like some painter or like artist about to die for a cause. I don't know. That was just the vibe I was feeling. It was very strange. They start reading out the votes, and Sophie's vote was, of course, the Little Mermaid theme, which made it even weirder. And then Vitor starts going on, because the initial vote tally was 2 votes me, 1 vote Vitor. And he's like, we always knew it was going to end this way. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I think I still have this in the bag. Like, I really don't think I'm going home here. And then Sophie changed her profile picture to match mine, sort of as like, last, like, I'm sorry you're gone, but like, it had to be this way type thing. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this isn't going to end the way it's supposed to end. And of course didn't. I did survive the vote, and Vitor went home, and I think that Sophie and Vitor were especially blindsided. and this is pretty irrelevant, but the scene from The Little Mermaid that Sophie put on the parchment it's a scene where at the very beginning of the movie, and they're like singing a song, and Ariel's just missing from the stage, and they're like, Ariel, like, where are you? And it was that exact vibe at that tribal, and at the same time, Little Mermaid was playing, and it was the point where Ursula dies, and the emotion was just palpable. Sophie and I went silent immediately. Like, I was physically shaking. Like, you would have thought I was in like a freezer. And right afterwards, the fallout, it was just profuse apology and DMs, and it was just very, very weird and poetic feeling. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything else on F5, but I think the ending of F5 is very profound, at least on my end.
Just one minor thing I'd add, which isn't something specific to me, but I didn't notice this. I noticed it, and I still don't know what to fully make of it. Both Nature and Vitor on their way out, like in their final wars, threw Didi under the bus. And like, I didn't really know what to make of that. I was like, maybe Didi has bad will, which maybe would mean she would be easier to beat at the FTC. Or maybe just one. I didn't really know what it meant, and nothing ever really came of it because she ended up on the jury. But I guess that's just something to mention. Yeah, and that's
I also thought that was weird. And that was a point where I think at F5, I thought I was taking DDF2 at that point. So yeah, I think that was something significant about that ending as well. But that wasn't the point that immediately resonated with me, considering the extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leafy, are gonna.
I was just listening to you guys. You guys are interesting. So that brings us to the final, the finale. And in the finale, we have 2 more evictions or eliminations before we get to final tribal council. Trey wins immunity at the final 4, which was my challenge. Yay, another fun Leafy challenge.
Wait, hold on. You can't skip this challenge because this
challenge was
I'm not
better,
skipping the challenge. I'm explaining it. So
Okay.
it was a 2v2. DJ randomized it, boys versus girls. And basically, Leafy's poker was split into 2 groups. There were the gamblers, which was Trey versus Sophie, and, the other people, which are TV and Banjo. by the other people, I mean the brains, because they were the ones that were in charge of creating the strength of a poker hand that Trey and Sophie would then gamble. Trey and Banjo triumph over Sophie and Didi. In the process, there was a special rule called the calamity, where if it happened, they would lose essentially double what they bet, and I think it happened to Sophie 3 out of the 5 rounds.
It happened to me 1 round when I had only bet 1 coin.
Yeah, so Trey got out pretty easy.
That was my bad because I was working really hard on memorizing the cards to the point where even when that half of the challenge was over, I was still repeating all the cards out loud over and over again. And Leafy and I literally pinged Leafy my submissions like, "Can I please stop repeating these cards, or will it be necessary for part 2?" He's like, "You can stop," and I'm like, "Oh, thank God." But I did mess up on one of the hands, and I was like, "Oh shit, Trey's fucked here."
Which brings us to part 2, which is one of my favorite games they play all the time in real life. It's called Drop the Handkerchief. Super simple. One person sits in a chair. The person behind them has a handkerchief. The person in the chair's goal is to turn around when the person drops the handkerchief and it's on the ground. Super simple. It's a mind game. Banjo actually, just like in we'll talk about later in the next challenge. Not to be
in
rude
the
to
shark
Banjo.
challenge.
I feel like I can be a little rude to Banjo because he did win everything. Spoiler alert. But Banjo here chokes a massive lead. And Trey ends up winning immunity after that
Wait, hold on.
lead.
So this is Act 2 of the 3-act play of Banjo gets screwed out by Trey on hardcore.
Coming from behind. Yeah.
It should have been better.
Which is like basically what I figured out. I think Trey figured this out about a few rounds after I did, but I figured this out almost immediately when he announced the challenge that basically there are only 2 possible outcomes you can have here as either a dropper or a thrower. If you're a dropper, you have basically 2 options. If you're a dropper, you have to either drop at 1 second and hope that they do the other things, that they rack up like 58 seconds, or you have to drop as late as you possibly can and hope to time them out. If you're a
Mhm.
churner, then you have two options. You can either wait until 59 because Leafy put a thing where the dropper couldn't drop less than a full second before. So if you just
That was to
churn
prevent something that happens in real life, by the way. Sorry, keep going.
So as long as you churn within the 59 second, you are guaranteed to not get the minute penalty. But if they did the drop at 1, then you
There's
would
a minute
get all that
penalty.
time.
Yeah.
So you could either do that, churn at 59, or you try to call them doing the other thing and churn at like 6 seconds or something in case they did that first thing. So basically, either way, you have these two options. And what the game eventually boils down to, once both people figure this out, is just trying to figure out which one the other person's doing and then playing off of that, which is basically a coin flip, which is why I
It's a
still
mind
contend
game.
that it's RNG.
It's a
because
mind game that
you cannot
it's
Well,
not
find.
my fault
no.
that you guys repeatedly don't want to take part in mind games. You're just like,
Well,
no, we're good. We'll make it RNG.
I'm gonna say my side of it because I did end up actually winning because of mind games.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit more about the beginning of this challenge though, because I think a team dynamic in a Final Four challenge is hell in itself.
Yeah, let's go.
We had to, amongst ourselves, not only pick teams but pick the method of which we pick teams.
Yeah.
That was terrifying. So
Yeah.
at the time, I still wanted Sophie to think she was my number one, which I did not have a number one at this point in the game. I was not really sure what I was doing. I was a little bit wishy-washy on virtually everyone. I still thought I wanted DDF2, but I wasn't confident. I had different people in my ear. I had a lot of weird feelings regarding the end game. But picking a person with this was hard. And at the time, I think I was still on board for taking out Banjo F4. My thoughts obviously changed, and I still don't really regret anything I did F4. But when I was initially put onto a team with Banjo, I was punching the air. I was so frustrated. I was trying to.
Yeah, Banjo's stinky.
Boy,
There was a part of me that almost threw the betting end of that challenge, which would have been, in my opinion, really scummy, which is probably why I didn't end up doing it. If I threw the betting portion of the challenge, which I was fairly confident in because I've been playing poker since I was very young, that wasn't exactly poker, but I know how to bet.
Underage gambling. Got it. Keep going.
Exactly.
Not in 4K.
But yeah, I was like, do I throw this here? Because if so, I can make sure that Banjo goes home. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm still not really sure who out of these three I want gone. So I really just want to get that immunity for myself and leave open all the options and make sure that no one pulls any fast ones on me as well. Because I think, as Banjo was saying, for some reason, I guess personally, I thought it was stupid, but my threat level had just dropped immensely at 5. I really don't know why, especially considering I just narrowly escaped a vote. I was a little bit less worried about going home here, but I still really wanted that immunity just so I had the options. So I ultimately did decide to go through it. I was able to bet my way through the first portion pretty well. I figured out the rules of the game semi-quickly. And then when it came to the handkerchief portion, which is still probably, I'm trying to think, this is the only challenge that comes to mind that actually made me physically cry. This handkerchief challenge, because I was trying so hard to catch up from my blunder. I had to make the first move, essentially, based off the way that the turns were ordered. And for some stupid reason, I didn't think to just drop immediately or turn immediately. I forget which side I was even on. I had essentially put myself at a 30-second disadvantage for the entirety of the competition. And once I had finally almost gotten a chance to catch up to that, we both dropped and turned at the same time. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I got a 0.
the snowflake.
I'm finally going to pull this off and turn this around back from my initial blunder. And we snowflaked it, and it ended up being 0.6 seconds off against me. And that was when I mentally broke a little bit. I was like, oh no, like I don't think I can come back into this through coin flips. I was so far behind after that one. I think I missed the one after that too. Like I got like a penalty or something. I don't know.
It did help that Banjo became the best quarterback in Simvivor history and threw the ball like 80, 90 yards down the field to Trey. Just incredibly long, hard throw. And Trey was there with a nice receive, bring it to the end.
Yeah. So I was in my confessional at that point. I had tears in my eyes. I was freaking out. I was like, I didn't even want the immunity, like I said, but I could have thrown the first part of that challenge and made sure that Banjo didn't get immunity. I still like I could not think about game at that point. All I was thinking was Banjo bad, me good. And the Banjo bad was winning. And I was like, no. And I was like freaking out. I was like, I'm choking this whole thing. I told Sophie during our challenge that I was gonna go win it for us. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my God, you are such a clown right now. You are going to throw this entire game because you can't turn on the handkerchief. And so I started thinking, I'm like, how can I get back in this challenge? Like every other challenge that I start losing. And I start trying to find a creative angle. And I think I hit like 6 minutes at one point. And I was like, you know what? I am so far gone at this point. I'm going to try and think of the dumbest move I could make for every move from here on out. So I started and I was just like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's obviously dumb for me to get to a point where I could take a penalty here. I'm going to do the other thing. And then Banjo would like turn quickly, and it's like, oh, whoops, I still have the handkerchief. Why is he holding the handkerchief? If he holds it so long, he's going to get a penalty. And I started racking up points back this way just by playing these weirdly suboptimal moves that I was now able to force by being in a position of danger. It ultimately came down to a point where we were both at like 6:30 something, and I was the one who was the dropper. It's like, as long as I drop this immediately, I'm safe for at least one more round. I'm going to be in this game for longer. So it's like, why don't I just hold on to it? So I did, and I just essentially stared death in the eyes, and I was like, if Banjo does not turn around here, I will simply just lose the game. But if I hold on to this and Banjo does turn around, like, I just win. And against all better judgment of probably Banjo and everyone else, I held on to the handkerchief, and that's what ended up winning it. So I think while it did start as a fairly RNG comp, it ended due to mind games, and I think I kind of picked that one up luckily. And I remember having to take a break from everything digital for like 2 hours after that.
I think everyone in the final four after that challenge was like, yeah, we need a bit. Like I think TML posted travel questions and Banjo just sort of answered, and then no one answered for 12 hours. And
Yeah, I
then everyone had to
remember
come back.
because I was literally late for dinner for that. I got yelled at for that because I was I got late for dinner off that comp, and I was just I ate dinner, I answered my travel questions, hit up on my DMs, and they're all just dead. And I was like,
I was following, like, again, that F5 vote was super traumatic for me. Following that challenge, I was not in good shape. I needed like a day-long break, and luckily I was able to pick that up. And I guess at that point we head into the vote, and as I said, I was initially leaning Banjo here, but as Banjo said, and as I was starting to realize, it did seem, at least, whether it was true or not, I mean, I obviously had a different perspective on the matter, that Sophie was in control of a lot of votes. And I think that she seemed to downplay this after the game ended, in my opinion. Whether she was doing it intentionally or not, she had been the swing vote for almost the entire game, all the way back since, as I knew, like way back on Oolong pre-merge. So I ultimately decided, I mean, there wasn't much more that came down to this vote, and like Banjo and I decided, because as long as I decided it and Banjo agreed with it, we were immediately forcing fire making. So I ultimately chose that I can take out Sophie here over Banjo, and I don't think Didi will take Banjo to the end over me because of the whole just Banjo being Karor bad or whatever. People still have that mentality, which to this day is ridiculous to me. I really thought that booting Sophie here could actually just guarantee me a spot in the final two. So that was ultimately my decision. And I guess you can talk on your end about that, Banjo, but that was sort of my rationale.
Yeah, so for that vote, this was probably I can't remember how I felt, but I definitely should have felt. And I think I did feel this way. That I was like, okay, I have somehow, despite having the Karor name slapped on me, made it all the way here. There's a pretty decent chance I'm screwed. So I was like, I need to just make sure that's not on me. And I'll be real, I do agree with Trey a little bit. I do feel like Sophie underrates her own game a little bit. She played a really, really good game. Like, it was really impressive. She would only be online for like 1 or 2 hours, barely talk, and she would like instantly have all the information. Everyone would talk to her. She would know everything going into the vote. She would be the swing vote for basically every tribal. It was honestly really, really impressive. Like, she had a real like I Trey, I do think you deserve pots, like 100%. But I do think she had a really, really good case for it. So I'm happy that she got that
I
nomination.
completely agree.
Yeah.
Fully agree with that.
So anyway, the point was going into this vote, I didn't even know all of this, but I did know enough to be like, okay, yeah, she's a really big threat, enough where I can pitch it as you should probably take her out because you shouldn't let her get to FTC. So I pitched that to Trey, I pitched that to Didi. They both seemed to buy it as much as I could get them to buy it, where I'm like, okay, this is about the most I can do on that front. And then sometime the next day, Sophie found out and she freaked the hell out. And Sophie apparently, and she confirmed this in her final words, I guess, that I was like, she saw me as like her last hope of survival in that tribal. She had like a feeling she was going to go that whole tribal apparently. And then you apparently just straight up told her, oh yeah, like that you were kind of locked there. And then Didi was like kind of wishy washy, but then took a shower and came out and said, yeah, I'm voting you. So she was working me really, really hard trying to get me to put her in fire making against Didi. And I'll be honest, I did actually think about it because I think in a world, if I had sent Sophie to fire against Didi, I do think Sophie wins it because in general, I don't know what the fire making challenge would have been, but from what I've seen generally in orgs, there's something puzzle related, and Sophie was really fast at those. So I do feel like she would have won. And then at a final three, I was thinking that could actually put me in a position where maybe I would be guaranteed FTC in theory because I did legitimately feel like even that Karor name was really almost all I had on me. If Trey or Sophie took each other over me, that felt like a really, really risky move. Risky enough where I felt like I could maybe even argue this, and regardless of who wins immunity between Trey and Sophie, I can argue well enough that the other one was a threat, where I can guarantee myself a spot in FTC. So I legitimately considered sending Sophie to fire, and what ended up well, the reason I did end up not doing it was because of my weird sense of morality. Because during that tribal, I said, and I'm paraphrasing, but I basically said, I promised Trey, and I used the word promise, that if I had the choice, if I won final immunity, I would take him to FTC against. I made that promise at the time because I thought my name was on the line for the F4 tribal, and I thought maybe that would help me keep myself alive to him. And after I said that, I kind of regretted saying it. I don't regret it now. At that time, I kind of regret it because I was like, this is kind of blocking me in. But I felt like if I sent Sophie to fire, Sophie wins fire, and then I win final immunity, I'll be kind of stuck because I don't want to break my word. I don't want to break my promise and take Sophie. But then if I took Trey, then they would be like, why would you save Sophie and then let her go out the next round? It would look kind of stupid. And so because of that, I didn't want to put myself in that situation of having to break my word. And so that's why I did end up not sending Sophie to fire and voting her off, which I guess in the end might have actually ended up a better decision. I'm not entirely sure. I don't really know, but that is the decision I ended up making.
I will confirm something Ben just said about fire making. Fire making does involve fire, and you're going to have to make it.
Okay, that's good to know. I think that definitely added a lot to Banjo's thought process there about whether or not Sophie would win the challenge.
Hey, I'm here to help.
Oh boy.
Does that bring us into the final three, or Trey? Did you have any thoughts that you
No,
wanted to
I
add
was
to
just
that?
gonna say. I suppose it's time to talk about the final
Uh,
hour of
uh,
my just impending mental collapse.
It's just Act 3 of the Trey Banjo Challenge cruelty.
So I'm gonna build this up a little bit because let's recap some events real quick. So we had the dramatic F5 vote. We had the F4 competition that sent me into shambles. I then voted out my best friend from outside of the game at the F4 tribal, and then you drop on me a 24-hour endurance challenge. I was in some of the worst mental combinations you could possibly imagine.
I was trying to get it to be like 72 hours, but hey,
Yeah, that's fantastic.
with like 1 minute check-ins too, that would have been funny.
That would have been great. But yeah, going into this challenge, I didn't know where I stood in the game. Nothing made sense anymore. I couldn't tell if I was a threat. I could not tell if I was the worst player left in the F3. I couldn't tell if my entire game was a lie. I was very just weird. So I was like, you know what? Let's just win this damn challenge. Like, I don't even care. I thought that those people were taking me, but like, that just didn't make sense to me. Because again, at least from my perspective, I had been doing a lot, like all game. And luckily, I apparently did a pretty good job mitigating that. I was worried that I somehow had a real reason for both of the other people remaining to take me finale whenever I thought that made zero sense to myself. So yeah, I went all out for this challenge, and I guess I'll give Banjo a chance to talk about his preparations for this challenge. But the finish of it was ludicrous.
I'll do a little bit of build up. I already actually had a feeling that, and I voiced this to Trey, that this is actually part of my pitching to vote Sophie out F4 because Sophie has literally no goddamn sleep schedule. So I was like, she's got to be really good at endurance. But so I had a feeling that the final immunity challenge was going to be endurance. I've had friends that played the org in the past, and I did actually lurk around in the Simvivor server before the season started, and it looks like y'all generally did endurance last. And just in general, when I play orgs, usually endurance is the last challenge. It's like seems like a traditional thing. So I just had a feeling. I always had in the back of my head that if I ever get to final 3, I'm gonna have to pull an all-nighter. That just was gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so I actually remember the night before that. It was super weird, like because usually I stay up late on Fridays and start on Saturday, and I really wanted to go to sleep early, but goddamn it, we're trying to figure out a start time, and Dee was just gone.
Oh, gosh. Oh, I wanted to go to bed too. Dee wasn't there.
Wait,
Currently waiting.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So anyway, totally lost my train of thought. Damn. Someone started DMing me. Anyway, so I was basically here, and I was like, all right, this is the situation. I have to win this challenge because I was like, either of these people would be goddamn insane to bring a Koror to FTC. So I didn't think any of them would ever do it. So I was like, I have to win this challenge, and I wanted to go sleep early, and Dee wasn't showing up. And Trey and I could see it in his eyes. I could see his eyes, but I could like feel it with him too. That we were both just like, Dee, can you please just tell us we can't do it tonight? Yeah. We can go to hell to sleep.
Yeah.
And she wasn't showing up. And finally, I was just like, Trey, let's go. I'm like, screw this. It's like 11:30. I'm off to bed. I'm not staying up for this. So I went to sleep. I intentionally slept in. I was the last person to wake up because I wanted to get a good full rest so I could pull the all-nighter. And I wake up, and then I read the tiebreaker, and I was like, and suddenly I realized the tiebreaker is whoever did the check-in first. And I'm like, shit. If I know Trey, and I know Trey at this point, this motherfucker's gonna pull an all-nighter. So I needed to make sure I was the one that got the tiebreaker. So I immediately had that mindset going for the first check-in. I was like, I need to be hitting all of these first. And so from the first one, I was like, okay, I'm gonna be hitting that enter key as fast as possible. I want those first check-ins, and that's where we lead into this amazing war of milliseconds because what happened was also basically I was like, I'm gonna be hitting this energy as fast as possible. So I would just look at my clock. It would be 58, 59, and I went boom, and I would hit enter. And right after my pattern was, I hit enter on it. Then I had Discord Snowflake open on the back. I went to Snowflake. Snowflake
we were doing
mine.
the same thing.
Snowflake's my one. Snowflake Trey's one. Because Didi was always third. Didi was always like a second behind. She was never really in that tiebreaker running generally. So I'll Snowflake mine, Snowflake Trey's, and then I'll write down my confessional how many tiebreaker ones I had gotten, and then I'd get ready then I'd go around and get ready for the next one. That was how I spent the first 12 hours of the challenge, and that was when I was getting a lot of those check-ins in. How do you feel about that, Trey?
So on my end, I always assume that everyone I'm up against is better than me. So in my mind, I had it as a given that everyone was pulling an all-nighter. I didn't want to accept that because, again, going into this challenge, I was already very mentally unstable. There had been a lot going on. I had a lot going on with school too. I was just like, I don't even know what was going on up there. But I knew that I wanted to get as many check-ins first as well too, just because of the tiebreaker. Even though who would think that this challenge would come down to a tiebreaker? So we started it out, and I realized very quickly that my internet was greatly impeding my ability to send things quickly. And it was extremely frustrating on my end. I actually, at one point, it's like 1 a.m. or midnight, I got really dejected and gave up on tiebreaker points because I didn't think I could score a single one. And I just sort of started freaking out. I was like, nobody's dropping out. And as the hours passed, just the mental trauma just kept accumulating. I was like, I'm really going to sit here for 24 hours going through all of this, and I'm going to lose because I can't send these fast enough. You were up by like 7 tiebreakers at this point, and every single one that went through was just like another punch to the face because I was still there within a second. It wasn't enough. I'm like, there's nothing more I can do to win this challenge. So I was feeling really, really down on myself going through like the later hours of the night, which isn't even a time you really want to be down on yourself. I started trying to do everything in my power to hype myself up. I was playing bullet hell games. I was trying to discover new music. I was literally just dancing for no reason by myself in a room. Like it was like 5 a.m. And
to stay awake, usually what I end up doing. This is I literally get most of my exercise for the year when I'm doing an endurance because I don't. That's what keeps me up. So because I'm not like allowed to stay up or anything. So I'm basically I have to sit in my room, which is dangerous because that's where the bed is, and bed means sleep, which is bad. So I'm just like sitting on the floor, and I'll start like doing push-ups. I'll do sit-ups. I'll do jumping jacks. Just like that's what's keeping me alive. I drink water. I use the bathroom for no reason. I try to watch a TV show. I can't focus on a TV show eventually.
Yeah. So I guess the turning point in this challenge was for me at like 6:30 a.m. And that was the point where I thought to myself, I was like, what are you doing? Like, you just survived at 5. You just voted out Sophie. Like, are you really going to sit here and let yourself lose this competition? I was like, no. So I started thinking, I was like, is there any way I could possibly time the internet delay and then start working backwards from that in order to get like insane timings? It turns out there was. And I started just analyzing when the minute flicked, and I was looking at a millisecond clock. I started memorizing this rhythm, and I was like almost running a metronome in my head of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had a certain way I was saying them out loud in order. I can go more in depth in that. I didn't even do that in my confessional, but I had like a way that I was emphasizing part of the syllable on these words just to make sure that it always ended up at the exact right frequency. And it ended up working really well. And I was testing it in my confessional, and I was like, I am consistently getting sub 10th of a second here. And the thing is, I had the count wrong on the tiebreakers by 1. I actually thought that you had 1 more than you had, and I had 1 less than I had whenever I went back to check them all. So I thought that I had to get every single tiebreaker for the remainder of the competition, and if I did, I was going to win by a single tiebreaker. I actually had one leeway point, but regardless of the fact, that idea that I was essentially hanging in this competition by a razor's edge because I had now gone through all the stuff before and stayed up for like 18 hours. If you think I was thinking coherently, I was not. I thought everyone was out to get me. I was freaking out. I was like, my life in this game determines on how fast I can send these messages. I am not going to miss a single one of these for the remainder of the competition. So I started a routine where I would, every time the 30-minute segment started, I would drink water, go to the bathroom, come upstairs, and then every minute leading up to the check-in, I would practice the check-ins on every single minute. And I would just go and go and go and go and go. And I started refining these, and whenever it came to game time, I started gaining back these points. I was like, okay, this is actually working. Like, we're going to pull something off here.
And I'll bounce in here because it was around this time. Just for me, I'm an hour behind Trey, so just like around 6 a.m. And suddenly he's getting these freakishly fucking fast. I don't know how he's doing. He's literally doing it, and I'm checking. I'm snowflaking him, and he's like 0.076 seconds, 0.059 seconds. I don't know how he's doing it. I was usually averaging like 0.2. I can't get that. So I was freaking out. So I pulled up a millisecond clock myself. I had it in the background. I was in my submissions chat, not my confessionals, and I was practicing, trying to time it, trying to get down to where he is, and I couldn't do it. I could literally, and I can process Trey for that. I could not consistently get it. I could not get it consistently below 0.1 second. The closest I could get would be like if I hit it at 59.7 on my millisecond clock, then like sometimes it would be in the 0.0 something range, and sometimes it would be in the 0.1 something range. But then when I would do it at 59.6, and it would always go too early. So I literally could not nail it perfectly, and he just kept beating me. And then I'll tell this part for my end because I can just imagine. I don't know what Trey's reaction was, but I'll explain what happened here. There are 3 check-ins left. The count for tiebreakers is, I think like 20,
22.
Yeah, 23 to 22 or something like that, or
I thought it was 24, 21.
oh, sorry, no, it's 23 to 23 because we're
yeah.
tied up. 3
I thought it
check-ins
was
left.
24, 22. Yeah. Okay.
So if either of us lose, both of us, we're each in a situation where we have to get 2 of the next 3 or done.
I thought
For
I get
me,
3 of the next 3.
yeah, for me, it's like I think 9:30 a.m. for me, or 15 a.m. for me. It was freezing as hell in my room. This was actually something that was keeping me up. It was really, really cold, and I don't actually know why. And at this point, it was so cold that my teeth were chattering, and it was starting to mess up my times and my practices because my hands were shaking too much, and I was messing up my enter key.
Mm-hmm.
So I made the very stupid mistake of let me get under the covers so I can warm up and hit these better. Second mistake, I can't really use my laptop very easily under these covers. I will switch to my phone. The next thing I know, I wake up and it's like noon, and I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak on that a little bit. The whole cold thing, I was very active in my confessional during this challenge because I did not move during this challenge at all. I forced myself to an uncomfortable chair and I banned myself from my bedroom. I think that the reason, because I was also freezing, I was like shaking and like, as he said, I kept hitting the shift key instead on accident sometimes. I was like, what the heck? I honestly think that it was just because our bodies just were not expecting to be up that late, and there was just no blood flow going on. I don't think that the temperature in my room was actually changing to that of an ice box. I just don't think enough blood was getting around my body in order to warm me up properly. I think that's probably what's going on in your head. But like that was one of the more brutal parts of the challenge. I've got to agree with you on that.
Yeah, and then, but I can't imagine how you must have felt when I suddenly just like disappeared.
I freaked the fuck out.
Oh, we can see it. If you look through his confessionals, you see the faces.
Yeah. So leading up to it, you can see my face started like to get a little bit crazy because I was a little bit crazy. I was literally just jumping like a rabbit in my bedroom. Like I was on the floor, I was on the wall, I was on the window, I was playing music, I was freaking out. I was like I'm so far behind, but that doesn't mean there's not a chance. So I was just going absolutely nuts. There have been many points in my life I have hit that level of nuts, but that was definitely one of the more memorable. And I think when you dropped, it really just occurred to me that like all of that work that I've been putting in, I mean, I imagine it felt just as bad for you, but on the other end of the coin, I stayed up all night. I mastered the timings and I did it resiliently, and it wasn't going to go to waste, and it felt really, really good.
No, I give you credit for that win. You earned it fair and square. That was the fair ending to the Trey Banjo challenge rivalry shit.
Well, I'd say, I guess we're going to get into the FTC decision here, but I think that one of the most poetic parts of the season was that you beat me at FTC after all of those challenges by just one vote. And I can't help but, I mean, myself, I'm a bit of like on one hand, I'm a pragmatist, but on the other hand, I really like when stuff like that happens. It was really that poetic justice. And I don't know, there was something very special about you beating me 4-3 specifically after all those challenge runs.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. Like we're so close all those times, and you kept scraping by me, but then at the very end, it's like the scraper buyers flipped over.
I guess we have to now get into why that FTC ever happened in the first place, and I don't know if I can call it a mistake. And I know that I read through Spec Chat, I read through every confessional, I read through all the jury statements. Objectively, it was a mistake. From my perspective, to this day, I'm not convinced it was a mistake, and here's why. So, when you break down the games of Didi and Banjo, like I had been doing for hours upon hours, making this stupid decision. I mean, as Banjo said, he did not have much control over his game throughout the majority of Merge, and I think it's weird in the sense that I think that Banjo's game pre-Merge almost perfectly parallels my game at Merge. If you just remove the final 3 and beyond point, like the F5 being the turning point, the taking out of the 2 ally pair, or like getting close to the other 2 people. Like whenever we were talking about this earlier, I was thinking, I was like, that's really bizarre. Like it feels, when you're saying like I relate to that, but like weeks later in the game. So Banjo's late game was, in my opinion, not very impressive, and I had been writing off a lot about Didi's game for a while. I'm not sure why, but I just assumed like, oh, she's my final 2 because her game wasn't as good, but I never actually stopped to really think about her game. And it was sort of the combination of the factors where I started thinking like, okay, Didi actually made some moves and Banjo really hasn't. And then I have Banjo on one end who's been working on me for like 18 hours straight, it felt like. It was, no offense to you, but that was one of the most miserable times of my life.
I can take it.
It really put me in a position where I'm just like, shit, man, like, what do I even do here? Like, what is the right decision for myself? What's the right decision for the season? Like, I had no way to tell what the jury was thinking. I knew that I didn't have Dino's vote in probably either scenario, and that was pretty much it. I mean, I knew that if I took either of them, they were both going to have locked votes. I don't think that in any scenario I was going to have Becca's vote. I don't think in any scenario I was going to have Dino's vote. I don't think Didi's vote would have been particularly easy to get if I took Banjo. I think the biggest flaw in my logic was considering the third juror, because even though I said it explicitly, I do think that if I took Didi, I would have had Banjo's vote. And I mean, you can attest to that yourself. I mean, obviously, there would have been a whole FTC process. But I think that might have been something I should have dwelled on a bit more. But when it came to making that decision, it really came down to, I think I can hammer in this decision into the jury really well. I think I have arguments. I think my game's been underrated. I think both people were considering taking the F3. I think that's pretty impressive. I think I can beat Banjo. And it came down to like, if Banjo beats me, like, that's just incredible. Like, good for him. I mean, I don't know what it was. And it finally came down. I was not 100% sold. I had flipped my placeholder at this point, and I had a conversation with Dee Dee right before the vote ended because it was the only time I was able to talk to her. And I was in class too, which made it all the worse. I was very stressed out. I was talking to my friend in person about it too. But Dee Dee's argument to me was essentially just, you can vote me. And that really put the nail in the coffin in my mind. I was like, I guess I can vote you. Like, okay. The confidence that Dee Dee had in her game compared to Banjo's just utter lack of confidence in anything for his game, which was probably intentional. But it just felt like if I took Dee Dee to the finale, Dee Dee was going to be there to fight hard for her game, and she played a game that she was really proud of. And I also played a game that I was really proud of, and I was like, I don't know if maybe I can beat that, especially that she has 2 locked votes. And it's the same end of the coin with Banjo, but I just didn't think it was as confident. So while from everyone else's perspective, it was probably the wrong move. And I've been in the position where I've made an FTC decision like this 4 times now, and every single time I've made it, it's been considered the wrong move. I don't think there is too much of an actual wrong move in this scenario. I think it didn't end up working well for me, and I came to peace with that when I made the decision. Whenever I locked the vote onto Dee Dee, I actually said, I'm fairly confident, or something along the lines of, this might explode, or this might obliterate my entire game up to this point, or I'm fairly confident this is going to obliterate my game up until this entire point. Something inside of me clicked that that was just the right decision to make. So I ended up making it, and hopefully that clarifies it to virtually everyone that I pissed off that wasn't Banjo.
I don't really. I guess obviously Trey was the one that has the majority to say on this tribal, but I guess I'll put in whatever 2 cents I have. The second Trey wanted immunity, I was like, fuck, because I knew that like he would have to be. I don't know how I was going to ever convince him to take me, and so I immediately knew I was going to work on this as long as I physically could. He was napping, so I sent him a DM. I waited for him to wake up. He got up. I worked on him all day until he went to sleep. Then I woke up before he did. When he woke up, I kept working on him literally all the way until like right before the vote locks. Like I was working on him in class. I wasn't even taking notes. I was in physics. I had no. I still don't know what we learned that day. Honestly, all I was focusing on was making sure we were doing like a group worksheet thing in that class, and every 2 minutes I would be like, I would like turn off my camera for like 2 seconds, pull up Discord, and see if he had responded to me yet, so I could keep defending my case. I was obsessed. I was not going to let myself. I will not going to let it be said that I went out for a lack of trying. Meanwhile, Dee Dee and Trey have the worst schedule sort of collaboration in the world in that they match up horribly. So they were barely able to talk at all, which I do feel like was a point in my favor. So I'm pitching to Trey, and Trey mentioned something when he was talking, which I want to sort of, I'll touch upon a little bit. Kind of a weird thing to say out loud, but like, I know that a lot of my personality in my confessional, out of my confessional, different way I talk to different people, it might set it's kind of confusing because I know that when I was talking to Trey, I had a complete like I had a total absolute lack of any sort of confidence in my game whatsoever. And even throughout just recording this podcast, I've been bashing my own game. I bashed my pre-merge. I've been bashing my merge. I'm probably gonna bash my merge again when we talk about FTC. Um, honestly, I'm I'm not like a cocky person. I'm not a very self-confident kind of person. I'm the kind of person that is very sort of self-cynical. I tend to bash myself rather than put myself up, and that's just in general whether I play a good game or a bad game or somewhere in between. I don't think I played a bad game this season. I don't think I played a great game this season. And honestly, when I started talking to Trey, I just started feeling like all the shit that I had in my head about how just I don't want to say disappointed. That sounds wrong. how I wish I could have really done better in this season. All the mistakes that I felt like I had made, it just kind of started pouring out when I started pitching myself to Trey. I just started putting down my own game mercilessly because at that moment when I was talking to you about that Trey and I was pitching you, that's how I really felt at that time. That wasn't even a lie. That was just me being honest. Like that was just me almost realizing to myself as I pitched to you that wow, how the hell am I even going to win FTC if I get there? I'm going to get 7-0 and I'm fucked. But I said no. I'm gonna keep trying. I would rather get second to get third. I remember I don't even know. I might joke about it in my confessional, but I said, well, there's one funny thing. I've gotten first before, I've gotten third before, and I've gone fourth before. So let me at least try to get second so I can have a new placement rather than repeat. So I pitched to Trey every way imaginable. I went emotional. I went logical. I went back to emotional. Ethos, pathos, logos, the whole gang.
Yeah.
And at the end, I remember the last thing. I don't know if this was a cinch that pushed it that like broke the camel's back, but eventually I was almost literally just like I resorted to ridiculous. That's like techniques that I felt were ridiculous from my.
I still think it's funny you said that. I know where this is going.
Yeah, so it's literally an hour before it ends, and I decided, wait, what if I just started painting Didi as someone that everyone was like is a big threat to win? So I go ahead, I click into random people's DMs, like Sophie's DM, Nature's DM, Vitor's DM. I copy paste some literally random shit. I don't know what the hell I even copy pasted. I go to Trey's DM, I paste him in, I change a few names here and there so that it looks like they're all saying, Didi's been playing a really good game. I might vote for Didi at FTC. Trey hasn't been doing a whole lot. And basically when I do that, and I don't know if that was it, but I really hope that was something that I'd like to think that's something that may push that over the line a little bit and help
It
Trey
helped.
make
I'll tell you, every single thing made an impact. Whenever I say, I think this season was one of my more open-minded seasons of Survivor I've ever played because I'm usually regarded as someone who's very headstrong. But ever since the very first vote of this game, I've been more open to other people's opinions. So I will say that defaked whatever it was, like quotes, gems, it had some form of an impact. And I mean, it all sort of just boiled over to that factor of combinations. You did play F3 chance either. I mean, that's just what happened in best player.
Oh, that's sweet.
Two men/boys in this call. Banjo versus
I'm not.
we got a lot to go over.
I should go. Honestly, I don't want to really be anyone other than myself. And I know that multiple of the jurors called me out for being romanticized stuff a lot. And I just really wanted to tell my game. Like the story that I thought was true, and I did my best. There was no point in my mind where I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna take this move from someone," and I'm still even a little bit confused on what I took. Maybe I'm just dumb. I don't know. But I got a lot of flack for the confident approach, but it was ultimately the approach that I would have taken regardless, just because it is just the approach that who I am. I wasn't going to sit there and lay down my game whenever I thought my game was very impressive myself. So that's ultimately what I took on. One word surfaced a lot at FTC around me, and I will say to a degree it kind of hurt my feelings, but that word was GameBot. I think that's the first time I've officially been called a GameBot in like the 5 or so RGs I've played, which is probably surprising considering I usually play like this. But considering that almost all of my conversations in the game were genuine, and then like everyone starts calling you a game bot, it made me feel very, very, very unconfident in virtually everything leading up to that point for a while. Because I was like, did they really just see me as like some robot who they were just like carrying to the end and not even paying attention to? And I don't know. There was no one to talk to about it because the only person I could talk to was Banjo. So I had no way to get away from those thoughts. So I tried to make sure it didn't reflect at all in my answers, but it was just something that was just eating away at my mind during FTC, especially with the fact that I effectively got no questions from two of the jurors that I knew weren't probably voting for me. It just felt like I was up against an insurmountable landslide for a while, and that's when it really hit me that I didn't think I could have won any FTC scenario. But the funny thing is, on the other side of the coin, I know that based off reading confessionals, that Banjo didn't think he was going to win either. So I think that from our perspective, that the jury was an especially brutal jury in the fact that they were very good at making us feel like we were not going to win the game. I did my best to answer questions, and yeah, I mean that's all I have left to say on FTC. I gave it my best shot, and it came down to that. I mean, we can go over who voted who after Banjo talks, I guess. But yeah,
So I guess me going into FTC is kind of ironic because I had the same initial idea as Trey and took it to the opposite conclusion. Where honestly, at FTC, I didn't want to just play something. I just wanted to like be myself in my speech or whatever. But difference here is that Trey isn't me. Trey is like Trey. You're like a really confident person. I respect that a lot. You believe in yourself and you own up to your game, and you write it the way you see it. But the way I saw things of myself, I was really dejected after that final three pitch. I had just basically bashed my whole game, and that's how I basically felt. So I felt like shit basically, and I was like, you know what? I don't really want to do some lie and try to make some nice, pretty speech when I don't really have anything good to write on it. And so that's why I did my probably the I haven't really written many FTC speech, so it's not much when I say it's the weirdest FTC speech I ever wrote. But I do feel like it's one of the riskiest and strangest FTC speeches I will ever write because I basically went the whole time and I started off by saying I'm just going to bash myself this whole time, and I hope you can roll with it. And so that's what I basically did, and I just kind of went through every mistake I felt I made in the game. But I didn't want to just literally just write a bunch of mistakes and leave it at that because that just sounds like throwing, and I didn't want to literally throw. So I did try to, and I did get criticized for this a little bit, where I did try to sort of put a positive spin on all of them and explain a little bit of maybe how good things that came out of this or whatnot. And yeah, I definitely the way the jury reacted to it, I didn't think I was gonna get good reactions off of it, but like definitely there were a few jurors that were like basically saying that like, damn, like they're like they knew. Could I honestly at that point I felt like the difference was coming down to what kind of jury this was gonna be. Where I felt like Trey, and I still feel like Trey has sort of objectively on paper played the better game. He had more strategy, he had more control. He just like if you wrote down our games on a piece of paper, like a final speech, so to speak, then his game is better. But sort of emotionally speaking, and this is where that whole story thing comes in, just looking at arcs, looking at character, looking at like that sort of emotional aspect that comes into Survivor because Survivor isn't just what we write on a paper. Survivor is like the beings around it. That's where I felt that I had maybe the best chance of winning against Trey just because of all the shit that I went through and somehow made it there. So I wasn't even trying to do this where they said I made that speech basically for pity. I hadn't even thought of that. But then I realized in retrospect that was actually probably the best shot I had because my only shot at winning basically was trying to get pity points from the jury, which I realize is kind of whack because like I don't really like jury pandering much either, honestly. And I straight up jury pandered like my whole speech. And like that's not usually something that I even like to do, but it was the position that I didn't realize I was forced into doing, and then I ended up doing it anyway. And in retrospect, I feel like that was the only way I could really argue my stance. And then all the questions I got, we both had a word. Trey had that word that hit him hard, which I think that was a little bit harsh calling him a game bot, which actually I don't know if this fucked me over, but I tried to step in and defend Trey myself because all the Trey is honest. I'll say this right here, right now. I'm literally being recorded. Trey is by far one of my favorite people that I've ever met in an org. Trey, I'm so honored to have been an ally of yours. I'm so happy we got to play together. Maybe it's because like literally midnight, I'm getting emotional, but like I'm so happy that we got to meet. And most of the real conversations we had, they were real to me. They were genuine, and you're just an awesome dude. And that's
honestly, I mean, same here. I think I said whenever you said this in FTC, I responded immediately. But like, our conversations were really awesome, and I mean, it sucked to me that you weren't on the jury to maybe share some of that. But I did try to have genuine conversations, and I think you were the one who was most receptive to that, and I was honored to be able to play with you regardless. I mean, it seems like you're a really good player, and I mean, the fact that we got to come together and do some cool shit together and become friends, I mean, it was awesome. So yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So while Trey had GameBot thrown at him, the word that I got thrown at me, which I was kind of ready for it, but I still hurt when it hit, was GOAT. That Trey dragged my ass to FTC, and that was about it. And so basically all the questions that I got FTC basically boiled down to, were you a GOAT? And I guess that's a big question on this podcast. Do I think I was a GOAT? I do think for a lot of the merge, I didn't have control over my own destiny. I do think that was true. I think most of the factors that led to me, or many, not most of them, but quite a few of them, were because I didn't have control over myself. But then again, I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, it could have easily been a Trey Nature FTC. I could have been the F6 boot. I could have been the F9 boot instead of Dino. What differs me from the other coureurs at Merge? And I just think that's why I personally believe that I wasn't a GOAT, because I put in the second I hit Merge, and from Merge all the way until F2, I worked the social game like there's no tomorrow. I try to have as many conversations I had with as many people as possible, as often as possible, which most of them that came easy to me because a lot of people in the Merge cast were just really easy to talk to because, this cast is really awesome and y'all are just really cool people. So, and that's where I felt like I was able to make it further when other people couldn't, just because I was able to make those connections. It sounds fucked up when I say it, because now it sounds like I was doing it for the game. I wasn't doing it for the game, but it did help my game, so to speak. Whereas like I was just trying to connect with people, and that helped me get that extra step and take that extra mile, and made all the difference, even when it comes to FTC votes, which I wasn't doing it for that, but I do feel like it ended up sort of benefiting it. And that was my whole argument as to why I wasn't a GOAT, because if I was a GOAT, then I'd just be some kind of like mildly inactive person that people dragged around because I'd be easy to be at FTC, and I just didn't feel like that was how my game worked out. That just because I wasn't in control of my own destiny doesn't mean that I was a GOAT. I didn't feel like those two were mutually inclusive. So I guess that's basically my summary of my FTC. I made a pretty sick rap diss against Trey. That was pretty bad.
I had a great time writing the rap. If I ever get on jury again, I might use that question, Taco. That yielded some fantastic results.
Yeah, Taco, I love that shit.
I didn't know I had that in me, actually. That was fun. I think the
that
rap
was one of my all-time favorite jury questions and responses. You guys both went in like you didn't.
Yeah.
You guys both committed. I love that. You didn't like sort of just say something half-hearted and went on. You guys made I love the commitment there.
Yeah, and I think that question alone really symbolized sort of what this season and this finale kind of meant to me, because we both went all out and we both came from very different directions. It was your classic social versus strategic game. In the end, both of us were still friends, and both of us were sitting there making rap battles and having fun with it, just getting trashed by the jury. Like, it was still just a great time. And I mean, yeah, that was one of the best parts of it. So yeah, I think with that, that's the end of the season.
Yeah, I think we're kind of wrapped up here. Unless Leafy, do you?
No, yeah, I just have one final question. You guys have definitely been the most descriptive group so far. We've really got a deep dive on what you. No, I loved it. I love these. I love hearing that people enjoyed playing the org that we put so much time and love making. So it really is nice for me to hear that you guys cared about this and put a lot into it. I just have one final question for each of you. What's something that you either learned or you're going to take away from your experience in Simvivor?
So I'm gonna start on this one, I think,
Yeah,
because
go for it.
I made
Yeah.
a big point about this in my confessional, actually, and it's in my final thing. I like to try and take something away from every ROG I play, and I think at face value, what I need to take away is better jury management. This is the fourth time in a row I've screwed that up. Like, I've really got to start working on that at some point soon. It's not. I just don't find it super moral to like kiss people as they go out. If I want to get a win into one of these sometime soon or another win, I got the one win, but that was a weird win. Leafy knows about that. But if I want to get like a clean, solid win here, I'm going to have to start working on jury management. So that's obviously one thing I've learned. But another thing I've learned is that I might want to be a bit more open to opening up because, again, a lot of the jury found me almost disingenuous in my personality when that was really just me being myself. I mean, I'm not the most emotional person. So I think maybe showing a bit more emotion or trying to make a point about showing more emotion, trying to get like try to hang out more with the people on the cast and see more of less of something I need to get done or get to the end with and more of something just like live in the moment of the game a bit more. I think that's going to be my main takeaway because I think that's the biggest flaw that was in my game this time.
Uh,
It's a great
I
answer, Trey. Thank you. How about you, Banjo?
I definitely agree. I agree with Trey that every time I play an org, I always try to take at least something away from it because there's always something I could have done to improve my game. And like, yeah, I won, but I don't think I won make playing some perfect Survivor game. There's a lot of stuff I could have done to improve. And I think I'm thinking about it right now, and I think almost all the mistakes I made, whether that be pre-merge mistakes, merge mistakes, I narrow it all down. And I think my main issue that really need to work on, that I've been aware of this, but it really got highlighted in Simvivor, is just I have my complete paranoia about fucking everything. That literally the entire game from the day that we walked into Marooning day one, and I was too scared to talk with anyone about real game, all the way to like FTC where I had literally no confidence and I thought I was honestly going to be like 6-1 or 7-0 or something like that. And that I feel like all of that, that's just I feel like I need a lot of my game is affected because I'm just too scared to do things because I always overthinking myself, and it's always good to think about things, but I always overthink it. And I think too many bad things could happen. I don't want to risk anything. You play it safe, and when you play it too safe, at the end of the day, you end up doing nothing. Survivor is a game where, or there are games where you have to take risks. At the end of the day, you have to take a swings at some point in time, but you also can't take too many swings. It's that fine balance. But that doesn't. But sometimes I feel like I'm overly cautious, and it's something I notice I'm overly cautious and I overcompensate and become overly cocky. And I think that's something that I'm going to be trying to, if I ever play org, I do plan to. I'm going on an org break right now, but I do want to play orgs in the future, like a few months from now. And
Absolutely.
when I get back into it, I think one thing I want to focus on myself is finding that personality balance, that balance in the mind of having just enough paranoia where I'm not just making decisions I'm thinking, but not just shutting myself down and just letting myself get like just clamming up and panicking and making stupid moves like going after the same guy so many travels in a row into pre-merge, or just I don't know, whatever happened in my merge game, just kind of letting not doing enough to not just kind of freaking out about not being in my hands, where I feel like hopefully in the future I can sort of try to find that balance between paranoia and confidence, where I have just enough of each to really focus my game and help me make the right decisions, second guess them when I need to, and then correct those decisions to help me sort of improve in the game. Yeah. Leafy, are you wowed by my wise wisdom?
For sure, man. I was totally wowed and not just finishing a drink of water. But thank you, Trey and Banjo, for joining me. We definitely took a deep dive into Simvivor Palau. I hope you guys stick around, and we loved having you. So thank you for playing.
I'll be around.
Thank you for hosting us. And really quickly, big shout out to all the Simvivor hosts: Jack, Leafy, May, TML, DJ, Moss, Scooby, Lissa,
Specifically, Leafy.
even Sharon, who I never really got to see that much. Shout out to all of you because y'all are a great
love
hosting
Leafy.
team. Simvivor is one of the best hosted orgs I've ever seen, honestly. Like, the production quality is really,
Especially those
really
Leafy challenges.
professional here. And I love all of you except Leafy. Fuck Leafy. Y'all can fire him, and I don't think anyone will give a fuck.
I agree.
No, but seriously, love y'all. Mwah.
Anyways, yeah, I think I definitely second that from Banjo there. It went really well, and I guess this is the official end of probably me talking about this ORG for a while, though it'll live in my thoughts. Yeah, thank you to the host. Thank you to Banjo, and yeah, I guess we end it here. Oh, I guess one more thing. You said we should probably rank this season, and I did think about this question.
Yeah, where do you rank this season?
We never got to it. In my opinion, this would be one of the highest ranking seasons I could possibly think of. And
as long as it's below Marquesas, I agree.
I don't know what happened in any other Simvivor seasons.
Well, Marquesas had a really good third place member, from what I'm aware of.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, the same way it's the same way that the second place in Palau was really cool.
Exactly. So you get it.
Wait, hold on. What about the first place in Palau?
I don't remember the first place in Palau.
I don't remember who won Palau, to be honest.
I'm leaving this podcast.
But anyways, I would rank Palau really high because, first of all, there's a ton of dynamic characters. There's a really active cast. You have some really good storylines. You have tragedies such as that first vote thing. You've got only like one real twist in the F13 vote, but that twist actually had a large, significant impact on the game. You get to merge gameplay. You have sad votes like Dino going out, but then you have, I think Banjo's story to the end is just a really, really good story. Because when it comes down to it, I beat Banjo at 3 challenges in a row by a razor's edge. Banjo came from the bottom tribe, and I was seen as someone who was more of a threat. I was captain from day one. Banjo came against all the quote-unquote odds, and despite losing all the challenges and going up against me, the poster child of Oolong in the final tribal council, and winning 4-3, like, it's just too poetic not to be considered a great season, in my opinion. And I mean, despite the fact that I lost, it's still got to be one of my favorite ORGs. I mean, it just was a really cool season. Like, that can't be understated, in my opinion. So yeah, I would rank it ridiculously high.
Again, I'm super glad to hear that you guys both had a good time, and I hope that everyone that played had a good time. To those of you that have listened to this point, thank you. And I'll see you all at the end of Guatemala.